All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Welcome to day one of active defense and cyber deception. This class is the culmination of the previous two classes. For those of you that don't know, this class was the original class that I used to teach at Wild West Hacking Fest here in Deadwood, South Dakota, which, by the way, is coming up this October. You should try to get out to Deadwood if you can. One of the most unique and I think bestest cons in the entire world. But I used to teach this class. I still teach this class, but I used to as well. I used to teach this class and COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we switched to it on an all online. We took all of our classes, all of our presentations. We went online in less than a week. And that was the beginning of anti-siphon security training. But in this course, I cover all of the different topics, tools, and techniques that I get super excited about whenever we're talking about making attackers' lives as miserable as you possibly can. And for this class, we had people that are like, it'd be cool if you just had a straight defensive class. Like, what is the straight dope, all killer, no filler defensive class that you need to have to defend your network? And the intro to security class was born. And then we had people that are like, hey, there's a lot of command line and concepts that are just going right over my head. And SOC core skills was born. So this class was the one that started with the other classes. Intro to security, intro to SOC core skills. And we'll talk more about that here in just a couple of minutes. Just really super excited about kind of showing how this all ties together and some cool things that are coming up this week. All right, course virtual machines. We're going to jump straight in with some really good stuff. If you go into the Discord server, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you need to come over to our Discord server. Right now, we're sitting at about 186 people on Zoom. I don't know how many we have on Discord, but yeah, we have a whole bunch of people, not on Discord, on YouTube. We have a number of people that are on YouTube as well, because we want to hit as many people as we possibly can in the world as we're giving away these training classes as pay what you can. So when we're doing this, we have a class virtual machine. And to gain access to that class virtual machine, you've got to come to our Discord server and you have to go to resources, because in resources is this link. We have these wonderful documents that give you instructions on how to get set up with the cloud virtual machine that we use in this class. It's actually two cloud virtual machines. We have our Kali virtual machine, and we also have our Windows Server 2022 virtual machine. And I'm going to talk more about some of our sponsors and the people that help make this possible. But yes, this crap costs money. And yes, there are people that help offset those costs, and we're greatly appreciative. So in this, we have step-by-step instructions right here. It goes how we get into Cloud Labs. Here is your code. That is the access code for this course that you can use. You put in that access code and it unlocks this class. Once you are in here, you're going to click the button that says Start All Machines. Right? Not start this one and start this one. Right here, it says start all machines, like it says in this little screenshot. Now, that starts both the Kali virtual machine and the Windows virtual machine. One of the biggest problems that people run into in these labs is they'll try to access the Windows virtual machine and then access the Kali machine, and it says it cannot find the Kali machine. That's because it didn't get started. So we need to make sure we start all machines, right? Also, when you start in this class, we give you enough credits to get through this week, all for free, no charge, right? So when we start up this virtual machine, you get roughly 16 hours of credits, and that is coincidentally the exact same amount of time that this class takes to get through. It's basically 2 days, 8-hour days that we spread over like Marmite on toast, that we spread over 4 days, because we do 4 hours per day instead of 8 hours per day, because that tends to make people's heads explode. So we spread it out a little bit, but what you need to do is you need to destroy or stop all virtual machines in between your labs. So when you're going through and you're setting up the lab, run through the lab, that's great. I personally destroy the lab every time. At the end, then I start with a brand new virtual machine every single time. It feels good to start with that. So please do that. Once you're in here and it's started, you can see right here, it says connect via browser RDP. That allows us to do just that thing that it says on the tin. So we connect via the browser, and it's going to open up a Windows Server 2022 system. Once again, we have some people that assist with this. It's really, really super helpful on that as well. Excuse me. I need a mute button. I'm sure I have one. Oh, I just have to touch my mic and it mutes. For networks, just click yes. There we go. And everything you need is here in the browser. That's right. The virtual machines and the labs are in the browser. Yes, they are. You can run this class. I had one dude who did this class on an iPad. Whole class, just on an iPad, just sit there clickety-clacking on his iPad. It sounds miserable to me, but different strokes for different folks, I guess. So you have everything available in your browser. We do not need to have a separate virtual machine that you download. It's all there. And yes, it is Apache Guacamole. Now, if you did another class with me and you did Intro to SOC Core Skills and you're using the instructions for that, it's possible that it's sending you to a different stack. We need to use the cyber deception stack for this class to work properly. Once you get in, everything you need to have a great time in this class is available to you. We have a command prompt because nothing's funner than command prompts. We have a PowerShell prompt. So PowerShell prompt takes a couple seconds to start, which is perfectly cool. Yeah, there is no VMs anymore. We also have a Kali command prompt. Now, when I open my Kali command prompt, it's going to pop up and it's going to say this host key has not been cached on this server. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's okay. This warning is perfectly cool. All you have to do is click accept, and then you're in, and then we're ready to go. So life is good. You have the ability of getting in and seeing everything that you need to make this class hum. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to change my settings in this. I do this a number of times. It's going to change the font because I have old eyes, and we're going to set that font to something a little bit better for the purposes of this class. We're going to go to bold, go to 18. There we go. Now it's a little bit better for people to be able to see what's going on. So that is the virtual machines. Everything's in the cloud. Everything's set up. Everything's ready to rock and roll. If you run into any problems, usually if you blow up your virtual machine, all you have to do is go back to the main MetaCTF screen, destroy lab, restart. Boom, instant, turn it off and turn it back on again, because that is the solution to the vast majority of problems that people encounter today. So please check that out. We already did Let's Get to Know the VM. All right, so this class is a little bit different, right? If we're talking about the concepts in this class that we are discussing, we're talking about some stuff that's kind of pushing a line in information security that may make some people a little bit uncomfortable, possibly, maybe, just might be a thing. I don't know. The idea of cyber deception is often conflated with the idea of hacking back, the idea of striking back. And as we progress throughout the class, I want to make it very clear, we are not teaching how to hack back in this course. We are teaching people how they can implement different traps, create poison within their networks and in their things that they're defending in such a way that makes it increasingly difficult for you to be an easy target for attackers to try to break into your organization. Also, the labs are not in the slides. The labs are not in the slides. We have some people that ask, where's the discount? Where's the code? Where's the code? It's right here. It's in the instructions. Right there. It says enter the code. And this is the code for it. There you go. So the code is right there. Novato, we got you covered. So the labs are basically in the VM, right? We have everything set up. The other thing that's kind of weird is we also have a GitHub server that has all of the class files and everything that's publicly available. I'm going to kick this over here. It's going to be in Discord. And I'm going to put it in the resources channel in Discord for further saving and coming back to it. So if you look, there's a lot of labs here, a lot of labs. We have Intro to SOC Core Skill Labs. These labs all work with the exact same VM. We also have the Intro to Security Labs, which all work with the exact same class VMs. And we have the Intro to Cyber Deception Labs, which once again, all work with the exact same VM. And yes, all of these are publicly available to everyone, everywhere, all the time. I'm not creating these classes and trying to set them up where it's like, this is my intellectual property. No. Once again, the primary goal of anti-siphon security training is to make training as accessible and as affordable as we possibly humanly can for as many people as we possibly humanly can. So keep that in mind. We have all of that It's available to you. We're going to be coming back to this. And when we get to a lab, I'll be coming here. We'll be going through the instructions in the lab, and we'll be sharing the link with you all in Discord. So please come on over and check out our Discord server if you're not there already. So we have that all set up. So you don't have to dig through hundreds of pages in a book that you have to carry around. It's like, oh, wow, we have all of these different pages. Where's the lab, right? So we have all of it set up. And we also have this class is being recorded, right? Now, sometimes whenever I teach live or sometimes on site, I'll give a USB with it as well, but it's embedded in Discord. Tomorrow, when you come back, this session today, through the magic of artificial intelligence and technology and next generation artificial intelligence technology processing, will be available in the resources section. So if you go over and you look at resources in Discord, the recording of this session will be available to y'all. You'll be able to jump in and see that recording. So this means if you have another session or you have work or you have to go pick up kids or you have to do something and you have to miss part of the class, you're going to be able to come back. You're going to be able to do it. It's not going to be something that's going to be like, oh, you missed it, you suck. And that same thing applies for the labs as well. Even if you burn through all of your credits, which I hope you don't do, you can purchase more credits so the labs stay available to you. I can only give you 16 hours of credits because if you're talking about running 2 virtual machines per student for 240 students, you can see that that costs money, right? I mean, you guys get that concept. Like the internet isn't free. It may not weigh anything because it's wireless, but it does cost, right? So after you get through this particular class, you can purchase more credits and you can continue working on the labs. Unlike a lot of classes where they're like, lab environment's only here for class time, and if you miss it, you suck. I'm sorry to be you. Nope, it's going to be available to you as long as you need it as well. Can't you do the labs on your own VMs? No, don't do that. Don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore because it was bad. It was good. It was good. It was fine. It was fine. It was wonderful, actually. And then not Microsoft, VMware got acquired by Broadcom, and they drove it straight into the ground. So now if we're talking about virtual machine support, we were thinking about moving to VirtualBox, but that was a pain in the ass for a huge percentage of students. VMware is now an incredible pain in the ass for a huge percentage of students. And honestly, running host-based virtualization is really difficult because a lot of computer systems by default will disable virtualization hooks within the CPU itself. So you have to go into the BIOS to enable VTX technologies, and that's different for every computer. And that's not even getting started with Macs, where Apple switched off of Intel-based CPU architecture and went to M1 architectures, which now means any VMs that we create are no longer compatible. It's a long way of me saying, you know what? It's in the browser. Let's do that instead, right? Let's just do that, right? So we're making this stuff as available as we possibly can for all of you. Now, as part of this class, as much as possible, I'm going to be trying to tie as many of the different concepts into the MITRE Engage framework. And the reason why this is so important to me is years ago, I trained a bunch of people at MITRE, and they basically came in and they're like, you know what we need to do is we need to create a deception framework that is created by MITRE that allows people to go to management and say, hey, this isn't just some crazy InfoSec dude that I ran into on Twitter that was doing these classes for free in his basement from South Dakota, which once again, whenever you say it out loud like that, I'm not going to lie, it sounds bad. It sounds a little bit crazy. But now you can point to a framework that is a trusted framework because these are the same people that do the MITRE ATT&CK framework that pretty much everything in the industry is tied to. So they have a wonderful series of frameworks that are available for people to go in and allow you to look at cyber deception and active defense in such a way where it's now a framework, right? And as we're going through this class, just so you know, you're going to run into a number of different things. You're going to be like, suspiciously looks like John ripped off the MITRE Engage framework for this class. That's not true. We worked together. I had a bunch of people that it was originally MITRE Shield. Engage is a much better name, by the way. So whoever came up with that idea, chef's kiss. But we worked very closely with a number of people at MITRE way back in the day when they first created this to kind of come up with these ideas of network manipulation, creating lures, going through how do we do network manipulation, how do we detonate malware in sandboxes, things of that nature. Just really, really super cool stuff. There's also network traffic analysis in here as well that we're going to be kind of talking about, like right here, network analysis. We're actually going to be starting with this one. We're talking about analyze network traffic to gain intelligence on communications between systems. Great. How do you actually go about doing that is the question. And we're going to give you some really cool tools that make that process so much easier for you to do. So if you're seeing direct ties between MITRE Engage into this class, it really has a lot to do with, we kind of came up together with the class and MITRE Shield, which became Engage. And my hat's off to the MITRE people for everything that they do. So we're going to try to tie it as much as we can. So you'll see everything we do will be tied to that, which once again is all about making people feel warm and fuzzy about implementing these things in their environments. It's absolutely critical that it isn't just a technological thing, but we have the rest of the organization that has buy-in with the concepts of cyber deception. So let's go ahead and let's jump straight in to definitions and disclaimers. All right, let's get into it. What are we calling this stuff? So just so you know, there's a lot of people, whenever we talk about cyber deception, they get a little uncomfortable. They're like, yeah, I don't know. Is that illegal? Is that entrapment? Is this something that we should do when absolutely everything else is done correctly, which means you'll never do it, which is a horrible way of looking at cyber deception. By the way, anytime you have somebody that's like, do deception, but only when everything else is done correctly in your environment, feel free to ignore those people. And if they're like, why are you ignoring me? Send them my way. I'd be happy to talk with them. By the way, I do want to apologize in advance. If you haven't actually done a class with me, I tend to be a little bit more blunt than a lot of people in this industry. So I'm going to apologize in advance if you're like, holy crap, he isn't hedging bets. Yeah. But when we're talking about people that say that, they're really wrong, like horribly, horribly wrong. And we're going to give you a bunch of really quick things that can generate quick wins in an environment. And it doesn't actually take away from any of the other security things that you do in your environment. Once again, you also have these various straw men and women that I'm creating in my head for the purposes of winning an argument with myself for a class of number of people that I haven't met. You have a number of people in that straw man and woman category that will say things also like you could get into legal trouble. Yeah, and they might be right, but we're going to give you a bunch of tips to avoid that as well. Or they say it's super expensive and it detracts from other security controls. Once again, they're horribly wrong. So let's jump into this. So when we're talking about these things, could you actually get in trouble? Well, yeah, you can. If you jump straight into hacking back, which we touch on just briefly in this class at the very end. We talk about it, get a warrant, please get a warrant before you do such things. If you jump straight into hacking back and you don't have permission from law enforcement or a warrant, yeah, you're probably going to get into trouble. Don't do that. But we have something like 15 and a half hours of not hacking back, where we can create a number of different deception lures and different traps for individuals trying to break into your organization that don't fall into the category of hacking back in your organization. And a lot of them are really easy, like super quick. Like you don't need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a product or a tool to get that level of detection in your environment. It's stuff that I swear to God, you can set up in 10 minutes in your organization, and it'll make all the difference in the world in trying to defend your organization. Now, once again, a lot of people will kind of impulsively state this is a bad idea. A number of people that get CISSPs, right? And I have nothing against ISC squared or the CISSP. I think it's a great certification, but they do talk about hacking back. And they do talk about how that might be illegal. You might not be able to do that legally in your environment. So what do? One, don't hack back. Yakety yak. Don't hack back. Do, 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 do. All right. You're not going to do that, right? Instead, we're going to set a lot of little traps and we call poison. You're going to create poison that the attacker is going to interact with. You're going to create poison that the attacker will reach out, grab, and take back. We're not going to create venom where we're striking back against the attackers. The other thing is, whenever you're setting up cyber deception within your organization, you may need to make sure that you vet the tactics with your change management team, talking about it with management, right? Talking about it maybe possibly with the legal team once you start crossing some lines associated with this as well. Whenever you cross those lines, you're going to need a warrant as well. And I'll talk about where explicitly you start crossing those lines when you're doing it as well. You don't want to become the thing that you're defending against. If you're starting to actively hack the hackers, that becomes a problem because a lot of times the systems the hackers are sitting on are actually systems that are owned by other people. And we can talk about international maritime law. We'll talk about that with laws a little bit later out there as well. ISC states if files are downloadable, then it's illegal. Secure concepts. It's a good point. It's incredibly wrong. It is. So do you guys want, do we want to break off a little preview? Oh my God, I shouldn't be referencing R. Kelly. Oh my God, that's horrible. Did I just do that? Yeah, we're going to move on. So let's talk about ISC and let's talk about downloading files and let's talk about legality. Okay. Brian, stop telling me that there's a squirrel. You know what that does to me every single time. All right. So there's this little thing called good faith security research. All right, this is from the Department of Justice. Okay. Here we go. And it talks about computer security and how you can look at security research and what is illegal, what is not illegal, and what are the bounds associated with defining legality of good faith security research. And I think that this is a great thing that was done by the Department of Justice. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background around this as well. But it basically states, if you're doing security research and your primary goal is to make things better, you're trying to do coordinated disclosure, you're not releasing things to the public, you're not doing it immediately for harm, you're not hacking into a network, stealing a bunch of data, and then, hoarding it for the perspective of like, extortion against an organization, then you're well within the bounds of good faith security research. So if you're looking for S3 buckets and those S3 buckets are unsecured and you find an S3 bucket and you can validate that you can download something, at that point you have to make a decision. What are you doing? If your goal and objective is to make things better in the purposes of good faith, you're going to release this information to the owner of that organization and go through a disclosure process to do so. And there's lots of disclosure processes, like Google has one. Hold on. And we can talk about Google's disclosure process. That is good faith security research. But if you immediately start extorting the company and saying, I found this security vulnerability and I want you to pay me $1 million or I'll go public, you're no longer doing things in good faith. All right. So how do I know about this? What is this whole thing? How does it work with? This whole entire idea was developed by a bunch of brilliant people at the Department of Justice. And I can get into details on why they created it and how they created it. It's really super fascinating. But at any rate, it was part of a case of the Capital One hack. So the Capital One hack was an attack where Radic broke into Capital One and was arguing that she was working within good faith security research. And during court, the prosecution was able to successfully show that she wasn't operating within good faith security research. I know this because I was one of the expert witnesses for Department of Justice on this particular case. So when we're talking about this and we're talking about legality and things like that, hopefully that answers your question about whether or not something is legal or not. A lot of it has to do with once you found something, what you do next on that as well. So I'm learning is that I can legally hack a company if I tell them and show them I fix the hole. No, don't fix the hole. No, don't. I never said that. Don't do that. No, do not fix the hole. Just don't. If you find the vulnerability, disclose it responsibly with the organization. And then I'd recommend using Google's responsible disclosure program. Right here. Here is Google's responsible disclosure policy. I recommend following their disclosure policy on that as well. Don't ever make changes yourself. As Warpath 252 says, and they're 100% correct. Well played, Warpath. All right. So as I said, we're going to be talking about a lot of laws. We're going to be talking about how this stuff applies. I unfortunately removed an entire section around laws because the ADHD law is dead on arrival and it's not going anywhere. But by and large, the things that we're going to be talking about in this class are legal up until a point, and I'll tell you that we've crossed that line and you're going to need a warrant on that as well. So if you notice, this particular class is active defense and cyber deception. Notice that that's two separate things. It's not really just kind of saying the same thing twice because it rolls off the tongue and that's nice. No, that's not what we're doing here. They're actually two completely independent things. And if we go back into the MITRE ENGAGE framework, once again, when we're talking about things like isolation, that's active. We're talking about things like network analysis, that's active, or network monitoring is also an active defense approach as well. There's a number of things that we're going to be discussing that are active in nature. It means it's not an issue of creating traps, but it's things that you do that actively integrate and you working with your organization. What is this like? How is this different than a passive defense? If you go out and you buy a security product and you implement it in your organization, you just turn it on, you set it and forget it, right? That is passive. You're buying a product, you're buying an EDR, you're buying something that sole purpose in life is to sit and monitor for an attack. It can be a firewall, it can be an AV suite, EDR suite, whatever it may be, you're going to be running this thing. So Win asks, is AV passive? Yes, it is. And that doesn't mean it's bad, okay? I want to make it very, very, very clear. Now, you can have your relationship with your antivirus product become active in nature if you're testing and evaluating your antivirus to make sure that it is working properly. That changes the relationship with your AV at that point. And we're going to have a lab dealing with this. We're working with Atomic Red Team a little bit later. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So just sit tight because that is in fact coming. Active means engaged. That means that we're using limited offensive actions against our adversary. Proactive, anticipatory, reactionary actions against aggressors. A lot of the technologies that you have, your defensive technologies, your firewall, your IDS, your AV, they are very much passive in nature. Once again, there's nothing wrong with that, but we're going to augment that with an active defense posture. This also becomes incredibly important whenever we're talking about artificial intelligence. Yes, I said it. Brian, set the clock 30 minutes before mentioning artificial intelligence, or I went 30 minutes between mentioning artificial intelligence, right? So when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're really looking at it from the perspective of a passive technology. But should you trust artificial intelligence? Should you trust that it's always going to protect your network? That depends. You want to trust your vendors completely? Do you think it's possible that maybe your vendors are kind of overselling the idea of artificial intelligence and what it can and cannot do? Possibly, right? So we'll be discussing this in a lot more detail, but when we're talking about passive, I see a lot of organizations that are holding off hiring. They're not hiring SOC analysts because they expect to be able to completely replace tier 1 SOC analysts with AI in the near future. This creates two problems. Number one, when AI says something's wrong, it still requires a human being to do research. If you don't know what you're doing, you're screwed. Problem two, if we cut off all the tier 1 analysts coming into security, then at some point in the future, we won't have tier 2 analysts. And at some point in the future, we won't have tier 3 analysts. You can see how this is a problem, right? So no, I don't think that AI is going to take over. People keep saying computer security is a problem that's solvable with artificial intelligence. I think that means that they know very little about computer security and even less about artificial intelligence at that point as well. We're not there. And we'll get into that a lot more as we progress through this as well. But somebody brought it up. Artificial intelligence exists for defenders. You're going to have artificial intelligence exist for attackers as well. So anytime anyone's like, artificial intelligence is going to solve computer security, isn't artificial intelligence also going to solve attacking? I mean, is this just a tool that's just a blue team tool? Or can we use it for attacks as well? Then it becomes escalation. It's our AI against their AI. Oh my God, it's crazy. All right, let's get off of that. But that would be passive. You still have to test and validate, make sure that those systems, regardless of what the systems are functioning the way that you expect those systems to actually function. What is offensive countermeasures? Offensive countermeasures employ offensive techniques, but as aggressors attack with a defensive posture. So what can we do knowing what are some of the attacks that an attacker may do? Understanding how those attacks work. Can we set traps in the areas that we know the attackers are generally going to do and then catch them? See, I want to show you a problem with MITRE. All right, so we're going to go to the MITRE attack matrix. All right. There we go. So this is the MITRE attack matrix. We have recon, resource development, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defensive evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control, exfiltration, and impact. I think it's getting a little too complicated. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's great for now. All right. Which of these techniques are attackers more likely to do? Now, there are people that work on a MITRE attack heat map, and there are some links. If people want to share some of their links, I think that that would be great. But which of these techniques are attackers most likely going to do? All right. So if you can, but they find heat maps, they're out there, right? We want to work on a number of them. You can say any and all of them, but there are very specific techniques that an attacker is going to do post-exploitation almost every time. So if we look at some of this, like kick it out, Ruby just nailed it, curb roasting. What are some other ones? Let's talk about privilege escalation, lateral movement, right? Curb roasting. Absolutely the attacker is going to do curb roasting. Let's do post-exploitation, right? Post-exploitation, lateral movement, curb roasting, right? Mimikatz, excellent, very good, right? What do we have some other ones on there? Maybe creating accounts. Can we detect that? What about an internal password spray? What about certificate abuse? See, there's a number of pathways that I want you to think about games of chess, right? Eventually, whenever people get really, really good at chess, they get bored with the concept of openings, where people are doing, Queen's Gambit declined. You got the Sicilian defense. You have all these different setups where like the first 15 moves of chess are pretty much instilled in people's heads on how to do them, set them up, and it gets boring. Computer security and attacking is very similar. Whenever attackers break into an organization, there are certain techniques that are far more likely to be a success post-exploitation. Dumping creds, NTLM net BIOS abuse via responder, password spraying, Kerber roasting, and it goes on and on and on. But if you look at it, there's really about 5 post-exploitation techniques that every single attacker is going to utilize. They just do, because they try them, because they work. If we know where an attacker is going to go and what are some of the opening gambits that they're going to do, don't you think we should be able to put traps there? See, if we're looking at things like Kerber roasting, we can create Kerber roastable service accounts that the attacker can try to curb roast. We can catch them. If we know they're going to do a password spray, we can create honey user accounts that if they do a password spray, we're able to detect them. This doesn't cost anything. This is easy to do. We can actually do LLM and R detection as well. We got this wonderful tool that we created called the Krebs Defense Toolkit that can detect LLM and R poisoning within an organization as well. So if we know where they're going, we know what the attackers are going to do, we can alter our defensive posture and put traps and use the attacker's inertia against them to redirect that attack in such a way that it increases our ability to detect and respond. We're going to talk about that more with the formula here in just a couple of seconds. Also, when we're looking at a keto, a lot of times we're using the attacker's inertia against them. We are not actively initiating attacks. We're responding to the attacks that come against us. Another way to think of it that we will use again and again and again throughout this course is think poison, not venom. Think poison, not venom, right? We want them to interact. We don't want to strike back against the attackers as well. Also, we're going to talk a lot about laws and legal footings and where the different lines are. And I'm going to be asking you, does this feel comfortable or does this start to feel really weird and scary? Like if we're talking about creating a Kerberoastable service account. Is that legal? Hell yes, it's legal. Does it make you uncomfortable? Shouldn't. What? No, we're not going to need a safe word. What about creating a password sprayable user account? We can do it in a way that it's safe. Is that legal? Absolutely it is. So there's a number of things that we can do with Honey technologies, Honey users, Honey tables, Honey tokens, where we can create traps in such a way that are legal that don't require getting a warrant on it as well. So what is cyber deception? In many ways, we're leveraging cyber deception in conjunction with offensive countermeasures. Yep, that would be one of the heat maps. Absolutely. Can you share a link with that? Like the number of times those things are used? There's a number of them out there. So yeah, that basically is a number of times each of those techniques. So blackjack, can you share a link with that? That'd be great. But you see the red sections? So we got the Splunk website that has that kind of heat map. Let me copy that over. Copy message link, go over here. So if we do this, oops. Okay, let me open it and not go to Discord. It's funny how links exist in Discord and they're always like, no, we gotta have, you come back to Discord. There we go, right? So if you're looking at this, if you're gonna set traps, any of these techniques that are red, those would be techniques that you'd wanna set your cyber deception traps in, right? Those would be the ones you would want to focus on, is kind of what we're talking about. So pretty cool. All right, so that is a heat map for Splunk, just one of the vendors that are out there. So we're talking about cyber deception, right? When we're talking about cyber deception, I have this formula that I absolutely love. Detection time plus reaction time must be less than the amount of time it takes for an attacker to break into your environment. Absolutely everything that you do in computer security is actually this formula. It is. So if we're going to have detection and reaction time, that means we want to be able to drive the detection time and reaction time to as low as we possibly can. We want to drive that down. We want to be able to detect faster. We want to be able to react faster. Now, traditionally in computer security, those are the only two variables that I have on the slide that you have any control over. That is it, okay? When you don't have deception and you have everything as passive defense, that's the only things you have control over, right? Your detection and your reaction time. Once we start implementing active defense and cyber deception in your environment, we now have some control over the attack time. So let's think about this in terms of a honeypot. I set up like an SSH honeypot on the outside of an environment, okay? And it's fine and it's good. As soon as the attacker breaks into that honeypot, at that particular point, if I have proper logging, I'm reducing my detection time because the attacker just hit one of my honeypots. Great. I'm also increasing the attack time because now the attacker is wasting time with a honeypot, right? So we can see now how we're not just working with that formula with D and R, right? We can now really mess with the attacker's attack time. And we have a whole bunch of things that we have in this class that are completely built around messing with the attacker's ability to successfully break into an organization and wasting the attacker's time. Now, once again, all of this stuff, I'm not talking about removing any other layers in computer security. I don't want to have that conversation. I'm talking about augmenting existing layers of computer security, specifically augmenting their weaknesses as well. So when asked, so are you able to increase attack time by increasing the attack surface? Yes, you can. And oh my God, do I have a lab for you. It's phenomenal. And we can greatly, almost exponentially increase the attack surface. So think of it like this. Imagine if I'm scanning a network and every possible IP address in that network is alive. And imagine if every port in that network is also alive. What just happened? The attacker's attack time just went through the roof. It's possible for them to wade through these things, but it decreases your detection time and it's exponentially increased their attack time. And that's what we're talking about. Yep, network enumeration will take forever, which is what we want them to do as well. So we're not trying to replace any other layers of computer security. Now, any class that you have, it's absolutely essential that there's a quote associated with Sun Tzu, know thy enemy. And this goes back to this heat map, right? We're talking about the Splunk heat map. If you truly understand where the attacker is going to go, then you're in a really good place, right? And I don't like to just throw around Sun Tzu quotes because I think it cheapens the concepts that we're trying to talk about, because you see it all the time. It's like, well, I'm a martial arts badass. Here I am quoting Sun Tzu. I'm not a martial arts badass. I work in IT. I'd get my ass kicked in any hand-to-hand combat situation that would ever exist. But whenever it comes to computer security, I have a pretty good idea about where attackers are going to go. What are the different techniques that they're going to employ in trying to gain access to a system? So if I know where the attacker is going to go, I know where to put my deception technologies. And as we progress through this class, we're going to go through each of these different things, and we're going to talk about the deception that you can employ that actually messes with the advanced persistent threats technology lifecycle. Now, the other thing I like to do, kind of with that detection time plus reaction time must be less the amount of time it takes to attack, is kind of like another way to look at it. In the military, they call it an OODA loop. In the Air Force and specifically in the Navy with John Boyd. I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but Top Gun was like, it's a real thing. I was very surprised to find out about that. Now, whether or not they like push F-18s to the point where they're broken and they can never be flown again, or they spend a lot of time playing beach volleyball lathered up in baby oil, honestly, I can't answer that question. But there is a school where they bring in fighter pilots, and those fighter pilots go through and they learn to be better at what they can do. And one of the guys, John Boyd, was an instructor at the Top Gun school, and he came up with the idea of an OODA loop. Now, this is really, really, really cool. You have observe, orient, decide, and act. Observation, unfolding circumstances, outside information, unfolding information that's a feedback loop coming in. And based on your observation, you're going to orient yourself to the battle space, right? Based on that orientation, of course, you got cultural traditions, genetic heritage, new information, previous experience, and analysis and synthesis. You're going to make decisions. And based on those decisions, you're going to take actions, okay? However, all of this is built on your ability to observe, right? If your entire ability to make orientation and decisions and actions is predicated on outside observations, and you're an attacker, today, there's a lot of cool things that attackers can do that make observation really easy. For doing recon, using Shodan, using Census, using a number of different tools to recon Maltego as well, and Recon NG, and the list goes on and on and on and on. They have lots of tools they can use to do recon and observe a target network. However, for attackers, other than threat intel feeds, which I'm going to get into probably a little bit of rant a little bit later on, our ability to observe is really, really, really bad, right? Most of the time, we don't know that we've been hit until we've actually been hit. So what if we could change that? What if we could actually change that in such a way where the attacker's observations are now screwed up, where they're trying to scan the outside of the network and the IP addresses aren't correct. They're trying to do DNS lookups, reverse lookups, and those DNS lookups are incorrect. If they're starting to get misinformation, then their observations are wrong, inherently so. That means their orientations are going to be wrong as well. They're going to make wrong decisions and incorrect actions. And in doing that at every single point, it increases their attack time. And if we have proper logging and alerting behind it, it decreases our detection and our reaction time. So the OODA loop, we got recon, weaponize, deliver, exploit, install, command, and act. We lie, misdirect, deceive, divert, obfuscate, delay, and disrupt their actions. This greatly impacts their ability to successfully break into any organization. Now, one of my main goals, and we're going to get more into the legal stuff tomorrow, one of my main goals is I really want to make sure that you all stay out of legal trouble. Okay. I don't want anybody taking this class to be like, I did the thing in John Strand's class and I went to jail. That's not the type of review that I want showing up on Yelp for the cyber deception class. Instead, we really want you to focus on a handful of things that'll keep you clean, that'll keep, dirty hands, clean money, right? We want to make sure that you're keeping things as clean as you possibly can. Now, there is some debate on whether or not you can avoid legal trouble and all these different things. And I'm going to give you the wealth of my information, for better or for worse. I apologize profusely. It may not be what you're looking for, but at any rate, we're going to get into that. Now, couple quick things. One, don't put malware where it's publicly accessible. Don't just set up malware on some web server where absolutely everybody that goes to your website is going to get hacked. That would be a bad idea. And yes, I'm talking about this because I literally had a customer do just that thing a number of years ago against my better judgment and recommendations. And I'll tell that story a little bit later, right? We want to prevent collateral damage. If you create a honeypot on the outside of your environment that is a totally accessible real Linux or Windows computer system, it's possible that the attacker breaks into that computer and then promptly starts DDoSing other networks. In that situation, might have some splaining to do, right? Or they break into some publicly accessible system and then start dropping illegal pornography on it, which is equally bad for you, right? We want to avoid those types of things. We also have warning banners. Warning banners are a surprisingly powerful tool if you ever go to court. You put on, we'll talk about this a little bit later, a warning banner that says any system that's going to access this particular resource will have multiple security checks to validate the users, the patch, the updates, the location of the system. It means game on, right? Like that gives us the ability, if we're using something like a VPN, to be able to do some level of detection on that system and validation on that system before it gains access to sensitive corporate resources as well. So we want to avoid these things. Now, in the world of computer security, whenever we talk about setting cyber deception, I have a number of people that are like, well, that's creating a trap and that's entrapment and that's illegal. Congratulations. You just outed yourself. You just played yourself. By the way, yes, this particular section of the class is brought to you by low sodium V8. That's what keeps me going. All right. So whenever we're talking about lethal traps in the real world, they are actually illegal. You cannot have lethal traps on your property, right? You can't have a bear trap on your property. You cannot put in claymores and mines and automatic firearms and robots and things like that, where if people come onto your property, they die. As much as a-holes in like Texas and Wyoming and South Dakota and Montana would like to say, I got a right to defend my property, I can shoot anyone that comes on it. No, they can't. You can't. You can't. And we've had a number of cases. There was actually a case a couple of years ago where somebody drove down the wrong street. That's all they did. They drove down the wrong street, neighborhood, like up a guy's driveway, and he shot him dead. He's in prison now. Can't do that. Another example, there was somebody that went and knocked on a door, wrong house, got shot. And the guy's like, well, I was fearing for my life. I was protecting my property. In prison now, right? You cannot do that. And this particular case precedent goes all the way back to the 1800s. The Supreme Court even ruled, back when it was only one judge, but it's a whole nother story. But the Supreme Court ruled you cannot put fatal traps in buildings. And the reason why, and it was logical, is if fire department people have to go into that building and there's traps, you might hit first responders. If law enforcement has to go into that building, let's say a criminal goes in or a child is in danger within that building, you cannot have lethal traps. Now, you have people from time to time that say, well, because you can't do lethal traps, you can't do cyber deception. There's a big difference in the world between lethal traps in the real world and cyber deception. Huge differences. Killing or maiming someone is not the same thing as getting their IP address in the eyes of the court. That's number one. Number two, you have a lot of people when they're looking at cyber deception and they're looking at these traps, they like to say it's entrapment, and an entrapment is illegal. A couple quick things. First and foremost, Entrapment is where enticement and entrapment is where law enforcement actively tries to get people to commit crimes. That goes all the way back to a Brandeis decision a long, long, long time ago in the 60s, where they were actively sending child pornography to people and then arresting them. That's not legal. You shouldn't do that. Yeah, that's a long story. We won't get into it. But law enforcement is subject to enticement and entrapment distinctions, right? For you, if you just have a honeypot on the inside of your environment, that's not entrapment. It isn't. It's a honeypot. It's a tripwire. It's an alarm that exists in a house, okay? So they're very, very different. But let's also talk about definition of illegal. One of the things we talk about with poison and venom is not trying to gain access to someone's computer. You're not trying to hack back. But we can do access checks, authentication, verification, geolocation, check the patch settings, check the machine names. In fact, it's kind of funny. All that stuff I just mentioned is probably being done by your corporate VPN right now. See, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about is stuff that's already actively being done. And your warning banners say that these things are actively being done. But a lot of people don't think of it as a preventative, proactive detection mechanism in your environment as well. So if you have any confusion, consult with a lawyer and get a warrant. Also, getting the right lawyer, super duper important. If you have a lawyer that's like, I don't know anything about computer security, but I can help you with this, get a new lawyer. Oh, there we go. Just got to fly. All right. So eventually you're going to need these skills, right? We're dealing with attackers. We have all these different people, they're getting more and more brazen. There's very little perceived risk at all on the part of the attackers. And we have rules and ultimately they do not. So we need to understand that we're probably going to deal with some type of VPN. We're probably going to deal with Tor. We're probably going to deal with I2P or any of the multitude of VPN software platforms that are out there today. You're going to be dealing with that. But we've got to find ways to deal with that effectively. We just can't be like, well, they're probably coming from a VPN. I guess I'll just give up in computer security. No. There's a bunch of stuff that we can still do, even if they are actively using things like different obfuscation and anonymizing type networks on their environments. So as we build on this, we're going to kind of take a quick break in a lab here. I want you guys to think about how detections work, and I need to update this, but this is a slide, and I don't think the numbers have shifted all that much, but it's basically how organizations detect that they're compromised, right? How do organizations detect their compromises? And it's got partner, monitoring service, fraud detection, customer calling up and saying, hey, I think you've been hacked. That's number 3. Yeah, that's way above your antivirus and your SIM. In fact, if we look deeper at this, if you take all of the external resources for detecting that you've been hacked, it's roughly 67%. Round up at 68. 67%. And yeah, Kelly just brought up a great point. They see the ransom note. Actor disclosure right there is right up there. That's where the attacker actively lets you know that they've hacked your network. By the way, you shouldn't be patting yourself on the back if you get ransomware and you're like, boss, I got some good news and bad news. The bad news is we're being ransomwared. The good news is our detection time was phenomenal. Like as soon as the attacker got in our network, we were able to detect it in 5-10 minutes after they sent us the email saying that they had hacked our network, right? We shouldn't be like, well done, security team, well done. So how do we change this? And this doesn't mean that everything that we're doing in the world of computer security is broken, but it does mean that there are blind spots. It does mean that no matter how we look at things, the tilt is definitely to the favor of the attackers that we have. So if we're thinking about like why current strategies aren't working, I want you to think of a couple of things, right? Like if I went back in time and I said, what do I need to secure my environment? I would have people say, well, you need a patch, you need strong passwords, you need anti-malware defenses, you need firewalls, you need proxies. And if I went and did that today, I got to replace the next gen because it's not next gen, it's AI, right? So now instead of next gen firewall or next gen anti-malware, it's now AI firewall and AI malware. And I guarantee you the next iteration is going to be next gen AI. It's coming. They're going to put these things together. Like it absolutely replaced next gen, but it's now going to be next gen AI firewalls, next gen AI SIMs, next gen NGAI. There you go, Velo. NGAI is coming. Be prepared, everybody. Yep. So you see a pattern where we're still saying the same technologies. We just throw more buzzwords in front of it. And a lot of it's kind of the same stuff. It isn't that they're some kind of amazing AI. They just make sure that there's some machine learning algorithm in there somewhere, and then they can add AI in front of it and have it go. So I want you to think of your security vendors, right? What are the top AV or EDR vendors? Look at this. Like EDR, they got us off antivirus because antivirus wasn't a good thing. No, you need next generation AV. And then they got us to say, well, this isn't even AV, this is EDR. Okay, so they keep renaming things, but think of AV vendors. Who are the main vendors that you think of whenever I say AV or EDR products? Who are the main ones? StoneSoft, Trend Micro, Defender, right? Absolutely. Got a lot of people typing. AMP, McAfee, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, absolutely. AVG, Meta Defender, ESET. I always have someone that's like Panda. I'm sorry. That's just funny whenever that happens, right? All right. So now I want you to think of your top 3 or 4 IDS firewall vendors, because many times they're not 2 separate products anymore. But if we're looking at IDS and firewalls, like what are the big vendors that you see in that firewall IDS? SourceFire. All right. All right. Great. What else do we have? Palo, McAfee, Fortinet, Checkpoint, right? Okay. And we got about 5 vendors per that we see showing up again and again and again and again and again and again. All right, now I want you to think of who's after your electrons, right? Who keeps you awake at night? Are you worried about China? China. Are you worried about China? Are you worried about Russia? Who now, coincidentally in CISA, is referred to as UNC or unclassified or unknown. Weird how that works, right? Are you worried about Russia? Possibly. Are you worried about the Five Eyes? Right? Are you worried about Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United Kingdom, the United States? Right? Are you worried about them? What about organized crime? Are you worried about organized crime and their capabilities? Are you worried about all of the above? Now I want you to think about those adversaries. I want you to think about those adversaries, and I want you to think about the limited number of technologies that you listed for AV, EDR, for firewall, IDS systems. All right. Do you think that they have the resources? Russia, China, United States, New Zealand, Canada. Do you think they have the resources to buy a license for whatever AV, EDR product that you have and then find ways to bypass that product? Or do you think that they sit down and like, oh my God, it's CrowdStrike. We can't bypass this. And the Russians are like, well, we're just going to have to give up. I mean, they're using artificial intelligence. Do you think the NSA is like, oh man, this SentinelOne stuff? Yeah, no, we can't get by it. If anybody uses SentinelOne, we're cooked. No. Direct access to your electrons? Go back to look at SolarFlare, what Russia pulled off with that attack. Crazy. The XZ encryption libraries, nuts, right? Absolutely crazy what we've seen. Never-ending exploits and backdoors. They're constantly collecting more and more exploits all the time, right? Anonymization in C2 frameworks, plausible deniability. I don't know if anybody gets that movie reference, but plausible deniability, right? And then the attackers are highly motivated. These are attackers that have jobs, just like you and me, but their jobs are breaking into your systems. And that's what they do all day. And once again, they're not going to sit around and they're not going to say, oh my God, they're running X vendor, we're cooked. It's not going to happen. And you shouldn't be surprised, right? You shouldn't be surprised. Most good testing firms are not thwarted by traditional defenses. If you're looking at BHIS, layered security, trusted sec, secure ideas, looking at all the different firms that we have relationships with and we work with, we don't get bogged down by these products. I have a whole bunch of engineers full time. That's all they do. And they can bypass these products. So if we can do it as a small firm in South Dakota, do you think the Russians can do it? Do you think the NSA can do it? Do you think North Korea can do it with way more budget than we have? Absolutely. So what do you do? Your technologies are great. I'm not crapping on them. I'm just saying we need to have a reality check with the technologies that we are using. And we have to understand what they're good for and what they're not good for. No, don't develop your own EDR. That's like rolling your own crypto, right? If you're like, well, if everybody's EDR, including Microsoft, who has billions of dollars to invest, and Sentinel-1, who has billions of dollars to invest, and Microsoft, who has billions of dollars to invest, if they're doing it wrong, I can get this in my basement, no problem, YOLO. Bad things are going to happen to you, and it's going to hurt the whole time that bad things are happening to you, all right? It means that they have their place. It means that they have their niche. It means they have capabilities that we can actually utilize. But it also means that there's holes. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to fill in those gaps, and we're going to try to fill in those holes with some things that can catch those levels of adversaries. So we were talking about this in terms of like, what are the different operating systems attackers are going to use? And we see a lot of things like Kali, Parrot, Windows. And I think the answer to that one is all of them, right? So if we're talking about different cyber deception things, oh, by the way, I do want to agree with what Brian just said. Look, there's a lot of politics and news and all kinds of crap that's floating around out there. I know that people get really worked up over their specific view of the universe. And once again, Brian, I should have brought this up at the beginning. And I respect that, right? Like no one looks at everything and they want to see the world burn. The quote from Batman, right? Everyone has their view of trying to make things better. But I am going to tell you, like right now, the way everything is designed to try to find a way to inflame and piss you off as much as possible at other people. If you're looking at the algorithms and Facebook and on X and like Instagram and all these things, the primary goal is to generate engagement, time, and clicks. And that is completely really focused on pissing you off at someone else. Okay? I think we can all agree with that. Okay? I think everyone can agree with that. Where things get really weird is whose fault is it? And then immediately we fall into the trap that has been set for us again. It's going to be the conservatives. They're all Nazis. It's going to be the liberals. They're all socialists and they're out for the blood of your children. And then we drop back into the exact same goddamn trap where people are actively trying to demonize as many different groups as they can. It's not even a left or right thing. It's like, let's find someone to get you to hate, right? It could be incels. It could be people with purple hair. It could be whatever. When we're here though, okay, when we're here, all right, let's put that aside because all that shit exists outside of this place. All right, let's try to stay focused on computer security. Okay. And I may make a snide comment one way or the other or things like that. And I apologize for that. But please, let's try to keep it civil. Let's leave all that shit here because I would rather have it focus right now on what do we have in common? We have in common this love of technology. We have in common the love of trying to make the world a better place, trying to make this technology safer for people to make it a better place. Let's focus here. All right. You got all that shit out there. You can go on X, you can flame on, right? You can go on LinkedIn, you can go all these places and you can flame as much as you want, just not in my house. Okay. All right, let's get into it. So what types of operating systems are people most likely going to use? It doesn't matter what the operating systems, right? It doesn't matter what the operating system is. You need to be able to make sure that we can utilize some type of cyber deception technology that can do attribution and mess with the attacker regardless of the operating system is that they're using. What are the obfuscation techniques? Plenty. There's so many ways to obfuscate. And I think that this gets into really big issues of computer security. When we're looking at the number of ways to obfuscate and do code, it gets frightening, right? Especially when we're looking at like vibe coding and artificial intelligence coding. You have all these people that are like, well, we're going to use artificial intelligence to code. Do you guys know what tech debt is? Like tech debt is where you build something, but you don't really build it with protections. You don't build it with like, little try, catch, fail, and then throw exceptions and generate logs and comment in your code. Like, if this breaks, it's probably this piece of code right here. AI doesn't give a rip about tech debt. Like, it just kicks out code. So the problem is we're having a lot of code that is being generated that may function, but how do we know if it actually functions correctly? Or more importantly, whenever it goes wrong, how do we deal with it effectively if it goes wrong? And the further problem whenever we're talking about artificial intelligence is if you look at like the hardest, language to code in, the hardest language is this wonderful language called Moblong right here. And this particular language is frightening. Like, let me show you hello world right here. This is how you code hello world. In fact, the guy that created this code can't even code in this code. Yeah. Now, I'm using this as kind of a worst case scenario on all the different ways that attackers can encode and obfuscate what they're actually doing, right? It's like obfuscation by design. And when you look at like artificial intelligence code that's been generated, a lot of times with AI generated code, you get into a problem where it is unreadable to a human being. And that's just kind of how it thinks, right? So you're looking at these obfuscation techniques, you're looking at these persistence techniques, and there's basically like, sand through the hourglass, right? There's just an almost unlimited number of ways to obfuscate these different things. Command and control, which we're going to get into a little bit later. We got another lab, and the lab after that's going to be command and control. There's so many ways to obfuscate that command and control. Same thing with exfiltration. So we kind of came up with a list, and I want you to know it's bad, but it's not hopeless, right? So much of our defensive technologies is predicated on signatures. And even with AI, how does AI learn something? Like, if you look at artificial intelligence and you train it, how does it get trained? We've got some people coming in. By the way, it's really nice to be able to teach a class where I can interact with my students. Whenever I teach this for on demand, it's not like this. I don't interact with students in the same way, so it's weird. Data sets, historical data, right? So we're training artificial intelligence. We're really, really, really good at training artificial intelligence to look at existing data sets and how to deal with those data sets. If it's all of a sudden encountering something it has never seen before, a lot of times AI isn't really good at dealing with things it hasn't seen before. It'll be confident, but it'll be wrong. Have any of you ever asked a question of ChatGPT and it was absolutely confident in what it was telling you? And once you pushed at it a little bit, it was like, oops, you're right, I was wrong, right? So dealing with that type of obfuscation is something that artificial intelligence doesn't do real well with, especially with new techniques that are out there as well. So the other point that I want to get to is you will be exploited. I mean, if you go to RSA, you go to these different conferences and you have people that are like, whoa, well, artificial intelligence is going to fix all of these different problems. If it was, wouldn't we see the number of attacks and the dollar amount associated with those breaches be going down? The amount of money that's being lost for cyber attacks continues to go up year after year after year, right? So we still have this exact same problem where it's again and again and again that we see the amount of attacks and the damage associated with those attacks continue to go up and up and up and up. So if we were believing the hype that AI was going to solve all of our problems, it's clear that that hype is not coming to fruition. And once again, we had this really cool link, the CyberWire, that Soren at CSN, hiding in plain sight, where people are using vibe coding and AI to bypass AI, right? So all of these different tools and techniques that exist just lead to more tools and techniques to attack. So we can work through that. So some of the things that we can do that I would consider to be active defense for some of these techniques is number one, let's look at segmentation, right? if we look at lateral movement on the inside of a network, what makes it easy to move around in the inside of that network? Well, one of the things is the ports that are open, right? If we're looking at it, we got 135, 139, 137, 445 are open for people to move laterally in the network using built-in Microsoft ports and services. And there's no segmentation. Further, a lot of people, whenever they run a host on the inside of an environment behind a firewall, that workstation doesn't have its host-based firewall turned on. It just shuts everything down. All of its defenses, right? It's just there. So that means a lot of attacks like pass the hash, security access token, pass the ticket, these attacks have worked in some situations since 1997, and they still work effectively today. And this gets into a weird thing that I like to say. I like to say it's acceptable that you're going to get compromised. It's going to happen. And I don't mean you like it. Like it's not like that. But it's acceptable like death and taxes, right? You're going to die. No one here gets out of alive, right? And that's the second Doors reference that I've done today. I don't know why I'm on a Doors kick right now, but whatever. But no one here gets out alive, right? You're okay with that. It doesn't mean that you're like wonderful with it. It's just that's the reality of the situation, right? You get the same, what is the quote? You get the same as everyone else. You get a lifetime. And if you do it right, it should be more than enough. You live with it. Taxes, you're going to get taxed. I love taxes. I know a lot of people hate taxes. I think taxes are phenomenal. Taxes are like the top 3 things you can do as a citizen in a country. Number 1 is serve your country, right? Military. Thank you very much for everybody that has served. Number 2, vote, right? Be part of the process. Don't ever be like, oh, well, there's all things against me. I'm not going to vote. Blah, blah, blah. That's the dumbest effing thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I think it's stupid. Vote. And the third thing is pay your goddamn taxes. If you love your country, pay your taxes, right? Taxes. You're going to be okay with that, right? It doesn't mean that I love taxes, but I'm okay with it. You're going to get hacked. Be okay with it. What's not okay is the attacker taking over your entire domain in an hour. What's not okay is an attacker dwelling in your environment for months or years, right? That's not okay. I would put jury duty at 4th. Yeah, jury duties. It's up there. It's in the top 5, right? But yeah, I would put it at 4, right? Put it at 4, right? So be okay with it, but don't be okay with these other things like lateral movement, enable to detect it, or dealing with anything like taking over the environment and sitting there for months and months and months and months, right? You're going to try to stop that, right? So we need to deal with that. So we can do things like turn on host-based firewalls. We can do things like utilize things like private VLANs. So if the attacker is trying to pivot, it shuts down that lateral movement as much as we possibly can. Because our exploits look like this, right? Standard everyday exploit, right? Just exploit that system through a link. They do something they shouldn't, multi-factor authentication bypass, whatever, just something, right? And then the attacker can move laterally. They can move laterally with PS exec, pass the token, our desktop, pass the hash. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And the reason why these work is because these are the exact same protocols that are built in to Active Directory. PS exec is part of Windows. Pass the token is how Active Directory Kerberos authentication works. Our desktop used constantly, right? Pass the hash. That's how NTLM works. Just how it works. And in many organizations, this is wide open, so anyone can do it. But if it's not detected, it means the attacker can elevate to the point of getting full domain administrator relatively quickly. So if we're trying to do an active defensive technique and an active defensive strategy in an environment, one of the first things that we should do is treat the internal network as hostile. And the reason we should treat the internal network as hostile is because it is hostile. All it takes is one system to get compromised, and then they can move laterally and they can take over the entire environment. So tune your system's firewalls, segment and architect your infrastructure appropriately on that as well. Segment your business units and organizational units so they can't bleed from one side or the other. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far, far away, I used to do day-to-day pen testing. When I started Black Hills Information Security way back in 2008 in the basement of my house by myself, well, I did it with my wife, and then I brought in my sister, and then I brought in Ethan, kind of started working on it in that way. I was doing pen tests on a regular. We had an organization that hired us to break into them, and they had really good security in the United States. They had good security in Europe. We found out that the company had horrible security in Brazil. We hacked a Brazilian affiliate and then pivoted through the inside of the environment, took over the rest of the environment. They didn't have segmentation on the inside of that network. They could not stop that lateral movement from one side of the network to the other side of the network. They just didn't have that segmentation. And many of your AV products have firewalls. Turn them on, utilize them. Now, why is this an active defense approach? Because it requires architecture. It requires you to identify what are the network segments for hosts, for printers, for file servers, and what are the network segments that need to access those hosts, like jump hosts for help desk, or where are your SCADA ICS networks? Where are your PCI DSS networks? You need to look at your architecture and architect it appropriately, because no amount of artificial intelligence is going to protect you at all if you have completely unfettered lateral movement in your environment, and your servers are in the exact same network ranges as your workstations, and you have no segmentation. It's going to be bad. So it requires that architecture. And this applies to zero trust, because if we're looking at architecture, the architecture can be in the cloud. How can you access those services? Are you using something like Zscaler to restrict that access? Are you using VPNs to restrict that access so your cloud services aren't exposed to the open internet? Think about how insane the cloud is, right? Like for years, we developed DMZs. We had firewalls, DMZs, we had these zones, we were protecting these zones, and we were protecting them with all this cool technology, intrusion prevention systems, web application firewalls, and then we're like, F it, just put it on Amazon. YOLO. And they're like, I don't know, it just seems to me like we're still getting hacked. I don't know what happened there, right? You still have the exact same level of security diligence that you need to put into place to protect you from that type of lateral movement, even if it's in the cloud as well. Because if you have proper protections, right? If we turn on our firewalls, right? If we turn on our firewalls, then as soon as I start trying to move laterally in that environment, I'm encountering a firewall to every single workstation. And every one of these workstations becomes a point of detection for you. So now your detection time just went down, right? Because as soon as I start trying to move laterally, it's done. You alerted, you're going to detect the system that has the icky face on it. And for me as an attacker, my attack time goes up because I'm not looking at a plethora or many cornucopia plethoras of systems that I can just move laterally and exploit all day long. Now my lateral movement opportunities are severely restricted because of host-based firewalls. As an example, you can achieve the same thing with private VLANs or 8021X in your environment. Now my lateral movement is stalled. Now I'm stuck. And as soon as I try to move off of this system, the ability to detect it has now decreased. The time to detect has gone down. The ability for the attacker to move laterally has now gone up. This is architecture, and it requires an active defensive approach for that architecture. So here's another way to frame this, right? If you cannot detect an insider, like an Edward Snowden style attack, if somebody is compromised or a user on the inside of your environment decides to wake up one morning and choose evil, then you do not have a security support structure. Your security infrastructure is completely and irrevocably broken. It sounds harsh, but it's true. Let me explain why. Edward Snowden was an evil actor, a malicious actor, maybe not evil. We can debate it, whatever. Personally, I think he was, but some people have different opinions, and that's great. All opinions are awesome. But he was a malicious insider. And he was going through and he was pulling down a whole bunch of files off of a file server. Just pulling them down, right? Put them on a hard drive and walked out the door. People are like, oh, geez, so there's nothing we could have done to detect that Edward Snowden attack. Absolute crap. Absolute crap. We could have set up file and share honey tokens. We'll talk about that more, how to do that easily in an environment. We could have set up like rate limiting and UEBA on how many files he was trying to access in a specific period of time. There's a number of ways we could have detected, but let's table those for a second. What is the fundamental difference between Edward Snowden doing malicious actions in a network and a user whose account is compromised and the attacker is using that account like a puppet to do malicious actions? There isn't. So when you're starting to look at computer security and you're looking at the reality of computer security, that any and all users can turn into Edward Snowden. If you look at the reality of computer security, that any and all nation states have the technical capabilities to be able to bypass any security technologies that you have, all of a sudden you're starting to get a real understanding of the problem of computer security. That it isn't something as simple as just buying a product, implementing that product, and then walking away like there's an explosion in the background. It looks badass. But the reality of the situation is that is the space we're dealing with. And to be fair, there are tools that help with that. And to be further fair, any one of the tools that you have can and will be bypassed, but it's very hard for an attacker to bypass all of them working correctly. Being said, we can put some traps that'll catch that attacker as well. Things like word web bugs, right? We can set up malicious, or not malicious, we can set up honey shares. We can set up honey users. We can cover roastable user accounts. This gives us the capability to detect those attackers that our existing security technologies may not detect. So this is going to bring us up to the next lab. Another active defense approach is trust but verify. It's one of the tenets in computer security that we talk about all the time. You see people, oh, it's trust but verify. Or you hear defense in depth. Good God. Constantly, well, you should have defense in depth, right? Okay, I don't disagree with those as concepts. What I disagree with is how people choose to implement those concepts in an environment. Because what in the living hell are they actually doing when they talk about defense in depth? What are they talking about when they're talking about trust and verify? We have very little like actual technical implementations other than the platitudes that we throw at these things. So with threat emulation, we can test and verify our security technologies. We trust those security technologies, but we verify those. And there's a number of tools like Caldera. Excellent little utility that you can use that is from MITRE that you can test lateral movement post-exploitation techniques. Or the one that we're going to use in the lab, Atomic Red Team, right? Atomic Red Team. So Atomic Red Team allows us to go through the MITRE attack technique matrix and test which detections are working in our environment and which detections are failing in our environment. And once again, this is a very powerful tool. This is an active defense. It's an active defense in cyber deception. We're actively engaging. We're actively testing our systems to make sure that those systems are working and alerting and reporting properly in our environment. The other cool thing about things like Atomic Red Team is it gives you a full breakdown. You can see the code. You can see exactly what it is what is doing. And then you can write your detects accordingly to make sure that you can detect them as well. You can also incorporate this with other tools like Sigma, which we'll talk about more a little bit later. But right now, let's go ahead and I want to get to this threat emulation warning after the other side of the lab. So let's jump in to it. So the lab that we're going to do is the Atomic Red Team lab, which is right here, Atomic Red Team and Bluespawn. So the first thing that we're doing is we're disabling antivirus. And I know that that seems a little bit weird. And when we talk back, no, we don't, the VMs, the cloud systems, get those cloud labs set up, get them going, start them up. They take about 2.5 minutes to start. It's a good time to start those VMs and get them up there as well. All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at this. Like set MP preferences, disable real-time monitoring. We're going to disable the antivirus, but we're going to do that from PowerShell, right? Then we're going to open up PowerShell, and then we're going to go into our command prompt, and we're going to start Bluespawn right here. So actually, we're going to do this from the command prompt. So we fire this up, we cd into Intro Labs, and then we're going to run Bluespawn, and we're going to run it monitor level cursory. It's going to start it up. Then we're going to open up Windows PowerShell. This looks really like the PowerShell prompts right here. There's a number of ways to get to them. You can click them right down here. The command prompt and the PowerShell are at the bottom. Or you can also access them by going start, command, or PowerShell prompt. You can get access to them a number of different ways. And then we're going to download and install Atomic Red Team. This is your prompt. You do not type in your prompt, okay? You're going to put that in. It's going to take a little while. I'm actually just going to go ahead and get mine going right here. So I'm going to go into my PowerShell prompt. I'm going to CD to my top level directory. I'm going to go ahead and get that going because it takes a little bit. There we go. And then you're going to CD into Atomic Red Team, invoke Atomic Red Team right there. We're going to install the module PowerShell YAML. We're going to import the module invoke Atomic Red Team. And then you're going to try each of these different atomic tests. And then you're going to go back to your Bluespawn tab and see if it actually detects it. All right. So that is the lab. Let's go ahead and let's get to it. This lab should take us up to and through the break. I will be back at 10 after. Yeah, Andy, I'm going to talk about that exact thing. So the sim alerts on Invoke Atomic and PowerShell, I'm going to talk about that exact thing when we get back from the break. All right, so let's get rolling. I'll see you guys on the other side. Let's go ahead and let's get to this. All right. So as you can see, like the reason why this is kind of an active defense, I think is pretty obvious, I suppose. I don't care about reaction zoom. I really don't care. There we go. What we're really trying to do here is actively engage and test our defenses. So I've already got Atomic Red Team I've installed and downloaded to this particular system. I've got to start up Bluespawn. So let's go ahead and let's go CD into intro labs from a command prompt. Let's go ahead and do that. So I've already got a command prompt up and running. That's Kali prompt. We're not there yet. And I just closed it. There we go. So CD into intro labs, and then we'll start the Bluespawn here. And I'm going to split my window a little bit just so you can kind of get an idea and you can see what's going on over here, right here. So we got it. It's doing all of these dtext on the right. I'm going to set that there. We're going to put this down here. There we go. That looks good. And then we're going to actually fire off some of the Atomic Red Teams through a module called Invoke Atomic Red Team. And by the way, if you want to learn more about this, you can check out Carrie Roberts' class on adversarial emulation. She's one of our instructors. She works at a Fortune 1 company. And she does adversarial emulation, all kinds of cool stuff for them on a regular basis. So once again, she's somebody that's actually in the trenches doing things, which I think is pretty cool. Install the PowerShell YAML, and then we're going to invoke Atomic Red Team. We're going to load in the PowerShell modules so it works. So we'll go ahead and do yes to all, because why not, YOLO? There we go. Now we're going to load that module. Go. Wait a minute, why is it? There we go. And then let's try to fire it up. Invoke atomic tests. There we go. All right. Now we have the test running over here on the left, and on the right, you can actually see that the attack is generating corresponding stimulus and response, right? So we can see on the right-hand side, you can see that it's just firing over. Now, some people are talking about the techniques don't exactly match up. That's because they're transitioning their technique numbers from the old numbers to the new numbers. So Atomic Red Team is still firing off the new numbers, and the old one has got the old ones. You see this all of the time out there. So sure enough, we're able to detect that. And you can see that the names actually match up as far as like when logon. So even though the techniques are a bit different, they are still coming back to the exact same names. So let's try a different one here. I'm not going to go through all of them because I want to get to something else cool. And there you go. It's doing group policy modifications, creating services, modification of an existing service. Now, this one is interesting because with this one, it generates and it says, okay, I see that you're they're modifying an existing service. However, 0 detections. What the hell does that mean? What that means is it sees that there is service modification. Something happened, right? but it doesn't exactly match a signature. Believe it or not, this is actually really similar to the way your traditional EDR works like that as well. Question was technique numbers. Yes, it does go to the old MITRE techniques, and there's lots of mapping documents to map those two out there. But whenever you have zero detects, it sees that something hooked in and changed the service, but it didn't match. So if you're looking right here, you can see like the above one, when logon helper, we had 8 detections and it can find these exact signature matches. So it sees that these exact signature strings were actually fired and it matched. Now, this is something we see all the time with EDRs, where we'll modify a service, but we'll do it in such a way that it doesn't match an existing denialist string of how that service actually manifests itself. So this helps because, as attackers, this helps us as attackers because it won't be a critical alert. A lot of times it's a medium level alert. So even though something says, hey, I got a medium level alert, is it something that got escalated to the point where an analyst will investigate it? If not, then I would kind of say it probably didn't fire the way that you wanted it to fire. All right. So I'm going to go down to the bottom and it says, hey, if you have more time, you can go through the instructions in AppLocker and we can do some additional really cool stuff with that. So what I'm going to do is just that. I'm going to open up my labs list and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into the AppLocker lab and I'm just going to go through the Metasploit instructions for that. So I'm going to do ipconfig on my Windows system over here, like so. So I've got my Windows IP address is 10.10.210.130. I'm going to go over to my Kali instance like that. I'll go ahead and get that cooking because I want to get into my Metasploit system. All right. I'm also going to make sure that my firewall is off, which once again, I'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and just disable the AV and the firewall. And then I'm also going to change my administrator password to password 1234. By the way, don't ever do this in production. I don't ever want to hear somebody be like, how did you get hacked? Well, I was taking John's class and I set the administrator password to password 1234. That would be bad. That would get you into trouble. All right. So what we're going to do is we are going to go through the steps that we have here. So I'm firing up Metasploit in one terminal. And then in another terminal, I'm going to go ahead and just open up another Kali instance. And we're going to mount a share right here onto our Windows IP address. Let's go ahead and mount that share. What is the IP? It is 10.10.210.130. Oh, 10.10.210.130. Oh, there we go. All right, so we got it mounted. And then we're going to create the malware. Copy that. CD into mount Windows share. And then we're going to create the malware. I got to put in my Linux IP address here. Get that over here. There we go. And my Linux IP address is I didn't want to open up a new one. Too many windows open. All right. So we got to put in our Linux IP address, which is 10.10.248.243. Creating that malware over here. And this guy, we're going to do use exploit Windows SMB PS exec. Wait for it. We're going to set the payload to be Windows wait for the tab autocomplete, meterpreter, reverse TCP. We're going to set the L host to be our Linux IP address here, which is 10.10.248.243. Exploit. There we go. Oh, wait. I screwed up. We're going to use exploit multi-handler. Got to redo all this. There we go. That's better. Now I got to redo all that stuff. So let's go back through.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I think that people can't see your screen. It's not full screen.
Oh, I don't have control over that, Megan.
Okay. Daryl.
Yeah. So we'll set the L host. Now type exploit. There we go. So now we got the multi-handler listening on that. There we go. Get closer. All right. So now we've got our exploit is set up. We're waiting for that reverse connection to come in. So now we have to go back to our Windows command prompt, and I'm just going to open up another command prompt. And we're going to cd into just the top level directory, and we're going to run trustme.exe. All right, so now we got our malware on the system. Now, what we're doing here, the reason why we're going through this step is you can use Atomic Red Team like all the time to generate a whole bunch of different test cases to make sure that your antivirus is working properly, all right? But what happens whenever you have a test case that maybe isn't in the Atomic Red Team, right? So you can go through, you can create all your test cases, you can do all this cool stuff. It's awesome, but when you're running into a situation where it's like, well, we don't have a test case for that, what do you do? Well, it turns out we can still do testing, right? You can run something like Metasploit Meterpreter, and then you can do that type of security testing. So let's say you've got something that's like, well, keystroke logger. Well, these attackers are using a keystroke logger. Well, I can run a keystroke logger. I got 0 detects, right? I got 0 detects. So that tells me that they don't have the capability to detect keystroke loggers. We may have a weird registry thing that's being done. So I can invoke a shell and I can do some registry key shenanigans, right? Let's see if it actually detects this specific registry key shenanigans. No, it didn't. Do you see? And what you'll find is for some of you, it may have worked. For some of you, it takes a little bit longer for it to actually come through. For some of you, it actually does the full detect. But the point is, these are the different techniques that you can do to try to test and validate whether or not our security support structure works. There, I just did another one, and then it found the registry key. So when we talk about this, so we can go off full screen now. When we talk about this, I'm going to, let's go ahead and kill that VM. I'm going to destroy the lab. We'll come back. And then I'm going to recreate the lab here in just a second. Once it's, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and do start lab. Oh, it's still waiting for it to shut down. So what we just did with that lab and why this is an active defense is we aren't trusting that our antivirus is always going to work. We're going to go through and validate that our AV is working appropriately in our environment. That's why this is part of an active and engaged defensive architecture that you would implement in your environment. All right, there, we're ready. Now I'm going to restart it, starting from a fresh thing. So we've got a couple of traps. We got a couple of things we got to be careful of, right? One of the things that we have to be careful of is writing a signature in such a way that it is just very tuned specifically. So let me show you an example. So this is one of the Atomic Red Teams, cool ones that you have here. So you can see right here, let me do an annotate with that. And let's go ahead and, I wonder if they have a laser pointer. Change my mouse. So you can see right here where it says regserve 32 SUI Atomic Red Team Atomics T 1117. I have seen organizations write a signature that's specifically looking for that directory. Does that make sense? Like they write it to just that specific, like atomic red team, atomics, and everything. Is that actually going to work to detect an attacker? Right? Yeah, no, it's not going to work at all. But I've seen people write signatures in this way. They write it to the very specific test that they do. So we need to be constantly testing and evaluating whether or not our defensive architectures are working appropriately. But we also need to make sure that we're not tuning our signatures for AV or SIM or any of those things to where it is specific to that test. Velo has a great point. It's like 1 + 1 = 2, but 2 + 0 = 2, right? Or 1 minus a -1 is the same thing, right? If we get to the point where we're writing signatures that are so rigid and so tuned for a specific like very, very specific case, then we're going to run into trouble. Right? We're going to run into trouble. So we have to be careful about that. So in this particular one, the way I would write this is the command prompt option regserve32 being used? If so, yes. Is it using the I option? If yes, is it using script object.dll? I would look at those combinations as a detection tuning opportunity to make sure that I'm writing my signature in such a way that it can detect the attack, but it's also flexible in a way that if the attacker's trying to obfuscate, I can still detect it as well. Now, there are a number of commercial offerings that exist, right? You can run Attack IQ, you can run XM Cyber, you can run Scythe, tons of products out there. Go look at them. I don't want to say that one of these is better than the other. There's just a number of options. You need to find the one that works best in your organization. Close this out. And ultimately, all of this, if you're doing it correctly, its main goal in life is trying to get caught. And it's trying to detect like where the gap is and making sure that it works. So earlier I talked about Prelude Operator, and Prelude Operator is a very, very cool tool that literally does secure control validation. So what it's doing is it's continuously testing and evaluating. Down here, I thought we could go through. There we go. It's going through and it's testing and evaluating which of the different detects are actually firing appropriately. And you can test it. And I think that they actually have full ties in with CrowdStrike. They used to have it up here, but they can actually hook in with a lot of right there. So they can go through and they can actually test the evaluation of what is working and detect it, whether or not it's being caught on the other side. Bluespawn seems to be able to define registry changes even when using a reverse. Let me jump up to the question. In the same sense, why does it struggle to catch a keylogger? Because of the way the keylogger works. A keylogger isn't using the registry key. So wherever Bluespawn is running, it's not running in such a way where it can actually see that service hooking into explorer.exe, which is the Windows GUI, where it can see that keystroke logger being hooked into your GUI environment. Point is, it's just not looking there, right? And also when we're looking at Bluespawn, we shouldn't be looking at this lab as like, Bluespawn is a tool that everyone should be using. You should be looking at Bluespawn as a stand-in for a commercial EDR. Another question was, should you destroy the lab? I just destroyed mine. I like destroying it and restarting it. I start with a clean slate every time. So that's what I just did there. So yeah, Bluespawn is just a stand-in. It's not something that you should be running in an enterprise. It's really a college university test project that works great for things like this. All right, there you go. So, all right, so getting caught. What are we able to detect? What are we not able to detect? One of the key complaints I get all the time from CISOs is we spend all of this money on computer security. When is the end? Like when is the end of the amount of time then money that I need to put into this? And that's a really valid question. And ultimately the answer is like never, I guess. So whenever we're looking at this and trying to break this down, we try to give management specific gaps and specific levers they can pull to fix those gaps. So instead of going to management saying, oh, well, we need DLP, or we need this, or we need this product or this product, they feel like they're constantly writing an endless stream of checks to try to solve security. Whereas if you can give them a gap breakdown that says, these are the things we detected, these are the things we missed, well, all of a sudden that's a lot more powerful, right? We can go through atomic blue team or atomic red team rather, and we can say, okay, here's all the things that we were able to detect. Here's all the things that broke that we weren't able to detect. These are the different tunings. These are the different architectures. These are the different products that we need to spend money on in order to properly detect them as well. All right, this is just another example of that as well. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get away from this can we be hacked mentality. And instead, we really want to focus on what can we actually detect. And that goes back to the really cool Splunk heat map of what techniques they're actually seeing and the real attack space that's out there. So what can we detect? Are we actually detecting things properly? Now, the other thing that's really, really interesting, and when you're talking about detects, and this is just a weird thing to be careful of. Okay, right here. So this is really a super interesting case study. And if I can get it to open. That's called survivorship bias. All right. So this is interesting. Whenever we're talking about what can we detect, I think that it's really important to be able to identify what we can detect. So in World War II, they noticed that a bunch of the airplanes that came back had bullet holes in these areas. And they were like detecting, okay, we have bullet holes here. Oh, that was weird. I did not want that to go. We have bullet holes here. 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 We need to reinforce those areas where we have bullet holes. That was the wrong way to look at this. I know that this sounds weird. It's one of those things whenever you first see it, you're like, oh, well, yeah, of course you'd want to reinforce where they're getting shot, right? Like we want to reinforce it. Let me reiterate a section of what I just said. These are the bullet holes from the planes that returned. Okay, you starting to get it? These are the bullet holes for the planes that came back. And one of my great friends, like Matt, he's doing stuff with CIS controls and all kinds of cool things. These are the bullet holes where the planes came back. Where you don't have planes coming back with bullet holes is where they got shot and the planes didn't come back. Yeah, yeah. Do you see that? Does that make sense? Potato's getting it. So you wouldn't want to put a bunch of up armoring where the bullet holes are. You would want to put up armoring where the bullet holes weren't in the system and the planes that came back. So it means the planes that didn't come back were shot in the areas in the white. Okay? So when we're looking at writing these signatures and we're looking at, looking at different attacks and we're looking at detects, it's important, right, that we are protecting the areas and the heat map of the detects, but it also gets into making sure that we have the ability to be able to write signatures for the things that will pop up that might be different, getting past that survivorship bias on there as well. All right, so we already did that. So the next lab that we're going to do is also an active defense. And this, of course, was in the MITRE area where we're talking about network analysis is one of them. And then the other one, God, there was two network ones. We have network analysis and network analysis is the big one that's out there. But whenever they have the specific technique, EAC 0004, that basically is all about how can we actually identify network traffic to identify potential malware specimens in the organization out there as well. So the goal of this lab is for us to understand a little bit on how advanced backdoors work, right? So we're going to be looking at the advanced C2. We're going to show you a backdoor that's using all kinds of really cool obfuscation. And really, just for the record, this backdoor works still today to get past firewalls and IDS systems, but it's not even close to like what a lot of attackers are doing for obfuscation. I'll talk more about that here a little bit, but it does highlight a lot of the key things that we're seeing, because if you're just trying to look at just the perspective of we're going to write signature-based detection, that is a passive defensive approach. It's important for us to understand attack methodologies. Once again, we're kind of establishing problem statements. So whenever we get to the RITA lab, right after this, we're going to do the advanced C2 detection. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to move on to RITA And we're going to talk about how we can do that type of network monitoring that isn't based on just strict signature-based detection as well. So the first lab that we're going to do, let me close this one out because it just gets in my way. I'm going to go back to the lab list, right? And then we are going to do the advanced C2 lab. And we're going to introduce you to a backdoor that uses covert channels, base64 encoding, all kinds of steganography and some fun stuff. And then we're going to walk through this one. And then we're going to do the RITA AC Hunter lab, kind of showing you once again why this all ties together with an active, engaged defense in an organization. So this lab right here is going to go through, what do we got? I'm about 4 or 5 minutes ahead, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and take this up to and through the break. So once again, we'll resume at 10 after. I'll walk through this lab. I'll explain network threat hunting with RITA, and then we will do that lab to kind of like set it up. And I think it takes us out tomorrow for the day with the RITA lab. So let's start with this one. Just do this one first, okay? We're going to do the advanced C2 PCAP analysis. We're going to establish the problem statement, and then we're going to do the RITA lab to talk about how we can address that problem statement in a way that isn't signature-based detection. So with that, get rolling. We'll be back in roughly 35 minutes and 9 seconds. Go get it. So let's go ahead and let's zoom in on my screen while I do this particular lab. So I did restart my VM. Like I said, it's just a good idea to start them both up, get them running, and now we're ready to do this lab. And like I said, we're going to go through this lab. I'm going to set up the problem statement for the next lab. And do we want to go straight into Ask Me Anything and then do the lab walkthrough tomorrow morning? Would you guys like to do that? So I like to do the Ask Me Anythings. Those are fun. I didn't tell you all that. But at the end of every one of these sessions, we do an Ask Me Anything because we have a lot of people that are getting started in security. And no, we're going to do this lab, and then I'll set up the next lab, but I'll do the walkthrough tomorrow morning instead of today. I think that's what we're going to do on that as well. No, it's not going to be like an hour of Ask Me Anything. It's just not. It won't. All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Kali instance. There we go. Get that up. Accept the certificate. I know some people that are my TAs are kind of sick and tired of some of the same jokes. I just don't have that many jokes, honestly. Like this one, I'm going to change the font size. So we're going to set the font to be bold. You're not afraid to cry at a good movie. Here we go. Which, by the way, saw How to Train Your Dragon live action. Great. That was very, very good. That was really cool. So there we go. All right. So we're going to CD into opt covert. And then we're going to look a little bit at this PCAP, right? So we're going to run TCP dump, don't resolve any names. We want to see the ASCII. We're going to pipe it through less. And there we go. All right, so now we're kind of at the beginning of looking at malware C2 channel. And just for the record, this C2, I know I call it advanced C2. I should say just enough advanced C2. Because this particular C2 would get past almost any of the different firewalls, IDS and IPS systems that you would encounter in your organization. They just would. It's just, you'll see. All right. So with this, if I hit spacebar a couple of times, you're able to actually start seeing the command and control. And this is the command and control right here. This is actually base64 encoded data that we have with it. So you can actually take this data and you can kick it out into CyberChef. So let me show you how to do that. And we also have some encoding characters here. Go to CyberChef. Oh my God, I just used Bing. I feel so dirty. I feel so bingy. All right. So if you take this base64 encoded data right here, it's in this view state parameter, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to copy it and paste it. There we go. And I'm going to paste it in here, put that in as the input. There we go. And it's not going to work right out of the gate for decoding in CyberChef, and I'm going to explain why. Let's go from base64. Let's add in the from base64 string there. And you can see that it says commands, open bracket, agent. We got the MAC address, and then look at the Wow. Okay. Why did it putter out? It puttered out because there's actually a carriage return new line feed in here. You got the %0A. And if we blow that away, it actually works. So the reason why those carriage return line feeds show up in this C2 traffic is, let's go ahead and let's keep hitting spacebar for some of them. Let's see if we can find something that's a little bit better. Control X. There we go. There we go. Here we go. Here's a longer bit of base 64 data. And once again, we have this %3D at the end of it. So this is just a backdoor that we actually created a long time ago. This was created by one of the BHIS employees a long time ago. Name of the tool is VS Agent. Oh, I'm actually inside here. Luke Baggett is his name. So I'm going to take this backdoor so you can see the commands. There's null commands. Each agent has a MAC address. And if I paste this in, it's a little bit more data. Let's go ahead and change this to an equals at the end. Kind of take this away here. Do that. Do this. Do this. There we go. So there we go. Now we're actually starting to see, we still have that %0A. There we go. So now it's getting a little bit better. There's another %0A. Notice how everything after the %0A gets kind of dead. And then there you go. So you can kind of see how we're taking this C2, and the C2 is basically just base 64. But there are some weird things that we drop in the middle of it to break it up. So if I do a %0A in the middle of this string, it actually kind of breaks out the base 64 decode process right there. But that's a carriage return or a line feed that we have. And it's just a different type of encoding in the middle of the base 64 encoded data. But if I blow that away, you can see that we can actually see the data there. So does that make sense to everybody, kind of how we're encoding it and kind of trying to hide in plain sight? Just kind of giving you an update. We have a Python script where you can actually do some of the analysis on that as well. So if we're looking at kind of going through this lab, we can see that base 64 encoded data, and we can actually see the beaconing attributes of that data as well. So here we go. We got the beaconing attributes, and you can see it's beaconing roughly once every 30 seconds on that as well. So we can see that we have a beacon once every 30 seconds. And if we go through, we can grep out all of the hidden form fields. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that value is that it's in here in just a second. So here's all the values. So these are the beacons, this EYJB2, 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 that is command 0. So it's beaconing. There are no commands associated with it. But then this one, we can see that there's actually cmd.exe being sent to it. And that's what we have. Oops. That's what we have here in CyberChef. So you can see that commands ID 6 results, no standard input, standard output, error received within 5 seconds. The command cmd.exe has been detached from this MAC address. So that's the actual decoded data. All right. So it's kind of, I guess, let's dig into this, and then I'm going to establish us for the next lab that you can do before class tomorrow. So we'll kind of do an Ask Me Anything, and then I'll immediately start tomorrow with a walkthrough using RITA and AC Hunter. What the hell does this mean? Well, what this means is the vast majority of your firewall, IDS, IPS systems out there will not be able to detect this. That's basically the gist. Okay? And I can sit here by hand and I can start parsing this data. And if we go through and kind of talk about what this underscore view state parameter is, if we're looking at underscore view state is a parameter that's used in .NET ASP websites. And it's a kind of a session identifier, and it's variable in length, and it's variable in content. Now, let me explain why that's important. One, it's going to be quote unquote pseudo random. That means it's going to be generated in a pseudo random style. Okay. And the other thing about it is, if it's variable in its length and it's variable in its data size, it's almost impossible to write a signature doing analysis on the view state parameter. Yeah, very difficult to properly do signature detection on this. And this is what we're talking about as a command and control, right? This is, an obfuscated command and control. And it's also in plain sight. It's not even using HTTPS. And as I mentioned, it's just advanced enough to where many IDS and IPS systems are going to miss this. Actually, all of them that I know would miss this. Now, I have seen some tools that write signatures specifically for this value right here, EYJJB21TY. But once again, this was created for a lab. Originally, this was created for a SANS 504 lab because I used to be an instructor with the SANS Institute. And it was intentionally created so it had some obfuscation, but this isn't like the level of obfuscation that we would normally do. Normally, what you would do is there would be a random seed value that would obfuscate this, and then the entire thing would be under HTTPS. So it would be encrypted and obfuscated even further. So here's the problem. How do you write a signature to detect this? How do you even write an AI algorithm that can actually detect this as well? Well, it turns out you kind of can using some machine learning stuff. And that leads us, and kind of me setting up the next lab, is this gets us into the RITA AC Hunter section of this class. So if we go back, this is one of those labs that exists in all three of my classes because, to be honest, like we use it in all of them. We're going to jump into AI hosted. I want to check and see if this works. I've had some trouble with it working in my browser. I'm going to go advanced, proceed. There we go. And we're going to connect into training.am. There we go. Put in the password. Going to be remember me, and I'm going to log in. And we're going to talk about how we can detect backdoors like this, and we can do it kind of going back to network analysis, right? If we're looking at network monitoring, which is the one that I couldn't find, monitor network traffic to detect adversary activity, and then we can look at network analysis, analyze network traffic, gain intelligence on communications between systems. This is more than just signature-based detection. So back in the early days, when I was talking with the people that first created the MITRE SHIELD framework, right? There was a lot of conversations around this, right? We can't just strictly rely on pure signature-based detection for trying to detect malware in environments. It's just not going to work at all. We need to do more. We need to do better in working with that type of detection in an environment, right? And what we have created in the team, the anti-siphon or the BHIS tribe of businesses teams, is we've created a tool called RITA, Real Intelligence Threat Analytics. And then what we're looking at here is the full front end GUI of RITA called AC Hunter, which, by the way, there is a free community edition that you all can play with and you all can run at home. And I've given you instructions on how to set this thing up and run it at home very quickly and easily. So when we're talking about doing this network level detection, like we're looking at MITRE and what it's telling us to do with Engage, and we're talking about trying to do this type of analysis, once again, it's more than simple signature-based detection. Because if we go back into this VM, if you were going to try to write a signature to detect any of the different backdoors that are out there, you're not going to be able to detect it. Right? This is just kind of showing you a peek down the rabbit hole using an Alice in Wonderland analogy. This is just a peek. We have all kinds of crazy command and control backdoors that we create specifically to not get caught. So in this, we have backdoors and we have things inside of AC Hunter that are doing like this one, which is doing frequency beacon analysis. And I think that this one is, what is this one? This one, I believe, let me check which one we have loaded. DNS Cat 2. We'll just leave it on DNS Cat 2. That's good. So this is a beacon right here. And this one has a 100% beacon. And the reason why we're 100% certain that it's a beacon is we have 20,000 connections. We have a very strong mode of 7,774 connection with 1 second intervals. We have a data size that is really just incredibly consistent. We have 20,053 connections with 52 byte payloads. And then we have this histogram of the number of connections per hour is relatively flat. This is what a tremendous number of different backdoors that we encounter look like. So we can do this kind of frequency analysis, beaconing analysis for backdoors, and we can do it at scale. AC Hunter and RITA, they can run, like our largest customer is running on a 100 gigabit network connection. So that's fast. If you don't know, 100 gigabits per second is quick. It's a lot of data. And we're doing this type of analysis with it. And the reason why we're doing this type of analysis with it is there's no other tools that we're aware of that do it this well. They just don't. So I talk about this in a little bit more in some of our other classes, but this tool is free and it will stay free because we have about 26 patents around it. It's named after my mom. I didn't name it. But if you've ever listened to Darknet Diaries, what episode is it? 67 or is it 76? I can't remember. It's one of the Darknet Diaries episodes, 67, where I talk about my mom. And if you ever heard the story about a lady that was a lunch lady that broke into a prison pretending to be a food service inspector, that's the episode. So if you guys go check it out, that's pretty cool. But this particular tool, we have it set up in such a way that you can run it at home, right? You have all these different things that you can do, and we're not charging hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. And if you're wondering, like, how normal is this? We have this really cool blog series called Malware of the Day and Active Countermeasures, and I'll put it up here really quick for you all to see it. But if you're looking at this, we have all kinds of malware of the day. We have command and control over ICMP. And for each one of these blogs, it goes through, these are the MITRE techniques that it's actually utilizing. It's a custom Go-based command and control. We have what is the target, what is the host. You can see these IP addresses, UDP outbound every 180 seconds. And then it has a full explanation of the scenario, how RITA detects it with analysis, how AC Hunter detects it with analysis. And then all the way down at the bottom, we have TCP dump data, we have Wireshark, we have T-Shark data in here as well. And then at the bottom, you actually have the packet captures right here. So we like to say, where is it? I think it's at the bottom. Here we go. 24-hour and then a 1-hour packet. And we also have the Zeek logs. So you can play with all of this to get all of this data imported and working, and you can play around with that backdoor. We have another backdoor, this one's C2 over a network time protocol with Fawn, and he wrote this one where we have a beautiful lab set up. We have full breakdowns of how this backdoor works, what the packet captures look like, and then down at the bottom, we have the packet captures, because packet captures or it didn't happen, right? It's one of our things that we have. So we have a number of different backdoors, and then your goal and objective for the lab, by the way, I'm going to kill my lab real quick. You should too. I'm going to destroy my lab, so I'm not going to burn up my credits. So your goal and objective for this lab is you're going to go into AC Hunter right here, and you're going to go through and you're going to follow the instructions. And then down at the bottom, it's going to ask you some questions. In the WinLab agent data set, what is the connection interval for 10.10.98.30? In the GCAD dataset, what is the historically qualified domain name for 10.55, 100, 111? And then for the DNS Cat2 JAW3 strobe dataset, what domain has the highest lookup account, and then lookup count, and who's doing those lookups that are out there? So this is the lab you're going to work on tonight, and if you come in early, and then first thing out of the gate tomorrow, I'm going to walk through this lab for you all to see it. All right, so now we're at the Ask Me Anything. I like to leave the last 30 minutes of class for Ask Me Anything. So what questions do you all have for me? So we got the first one. So how to convince your company to give you at least $1,000 a year for training when you have a small IT security team, or the only security analyst while the other two are GRC. At the moment, I don't even know how much our team as a whole gets per year for education. Get this for a conference. Yeah, that's a tough one. I will tell you that, usually one of the things you can do is you can do comparatives. So if you're looking at actually, Megan, do you guys want to see we have, speaking of $1,000, we have the entire course catalog, Moonso, that is available for anti-siphon for $1,500 a year. That's all of our classes.
I'll get it.
Thank you. So here's what you do. You show them like all of the training that you get, right? For $1,500 a year. That's all of our classes on demand. Let me go to the anti-siphon here. I misspell everything. And if you go to our on-demand course catalog right here, these are all of our on-demand courses. So this is every single class that we have, all of them. And I can't even remember. I think it's like 47 classes or something like that. It's a lot of classes, and they're all available on demand, so you can pull them down, and you get access to all of them. And you can compare that, hypothetically. Let's go to SANS. I'll go to a SANS class. Oh, let's go to SANS 508. Let's go to that one. So if you go to this class right here, some great instructors, some really cool people. But if we register for a class, we're looking at $8,780, right? So if you're doing comparatives and you're saying, how much do you get? What do you get? I think that that's an important way to kind of show this. And by the way, the instructors that we have at Anti-Siphon, a number of our instructors, if you go over here to our who we are instructors, it's like SANS instructor, SANS instructor, SANS fellow, SANS instructor. I could go down the line. Like we have a lot of SANS fellows and a lot of SANS instructors that are in here. Another SANS instructor, another SANS instructor, another SANS fellow. So we got a lot of people that are just phenomenal. So if you want like that type of quality, but you can actually afford it, that's how you would do it. All right, so let's get off the marketing shit. All right, what other questions do you guys have? But that is only something we do for Black Friday. But I like opening it up to my students because there's a lot of people that are just like, holy crap, this is really cool, that you can jump in. All right, what else? What other questions? Planning Black Hat B-Sides DEF CON a couple of days. Can you share some hints on what to take to these? I just, you know what? I don't really care. I go to these conferences, I bring my laptop and I tether through my phone. You're going to want to watch on your cell phone at the top. If you start getting this weird like little icon that you're connected to a local femtocell, just shut off your phone. You do see that every once in a while, but it's relatively rare for that. You just don't have to worry about it all that much. But yeah, that's about all I do is I take my notebook, take my phone, tether through my phone, stay away from public Wi-Fi and just get going. That would be good. I just bit off the bullet, started my own OffSec consulting. Congratulations. Here's what I'm going to do for you. If somebody can get D8RH8R's information, Megan, if we can get his info or their info, let's go ahead and get them access to my intro to pen testing class.
Okay.
And the intro to pen testing class is how I started Black Hills Information Security and built it around. So we'll be happy to give you access to that. So welcome to the world. May God have mercy on your soul. And I know there's people that are like, well, why did he get it? He's starting up his own consulting practice doing pen testing and offensive stuff. There's a special place in my heart for people that are that crazy and that stupid to do it. So great, just absolute data hater. That makes sense. So we'll do what we can to help you get set up. So yeah, I'm going to be honest, like they're real dumb. I did this. I'm equally stupid. And it's an absolutely horrible, horrible thing to do in life, to do yourself and to your family. And I'm going to try to help you out on that as much as I possibly can. So people are like, why did he get that free? He's going to need it. They're going to need it, folks. That's what I'm saying. They're going to need all the help that they can get. How do you believe AI will affect future SOC analysts? I'm currently a college student getting my degree in AI. Do you believe AI would be beneficial or will it harm? So Ava, I'm going to give you an analogy that I give all the time. Okay. So years and years and years ago, you've heard of Luddites, right? Luddites are people that were anti-technology. So whenever you hear of Luddites, a lot of times it's a derogatory term. It's people that are like, well, you're anti-technology, so you're a Luddite and you're stupid. Ugh. Turns out Luddites were right. Luddites were specifically against a technology that was a loom. So a loom is something that actually put together, it spin off and create fabric, right? It could take string and it could make it in fabric very, very, very quickly. And Luddites would go through the countryside and they would smash looms. And their concern about the looms were that the looms were going to completely destroy the fabric manufacturing industry. And a whole bunch of people would lose their livelihoods if they didn't fight automation. And Luddites were right. They were 100% correct. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They were right. The loom and the automation that was created absolutely destroyed fabric and seamstresses and tailors and all of these different people. It just devastated that entire space. It truly did. But it happened. And I want to say it was inevitable, right? And if you're looking at automation and farming, same thing happens. You have far fewer farmers today than you had 100 years ago, mainly because the benefits associated with automation. So let me bring it into something that's a little bit more prescient. In the 60s and stuff, like when you were learning math, you had to learn it by hand. And if you used a slide rule, they looked at a slide rule as a crutch. No, you can't use slide rules. That's cheating. You can use a slide rule eventually, but you got to learn how to do it by hand. And then when calculators came out, they were like, oh, no. You're not always going to have a calculator. If you take your SAT, ACT, you cannot have a calculator because in the real world, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket all the time. Someone was wrong. Mrs. Reed, you were wrong. Then when they're talking about specific calculators, you got into TI-85s and TI-86s. It's like, oh, well, we'll let you use a calculator or slide rule if you're crazy. But these graphing calculators, they're a bridge too far. Now, even for engineering exams, you can bring in programming calculators, right? Same thing with computing, right? The first paper I ever wrote on a computer was with a dot matrix printer, an Oki data printer, where it's like, it was all monochrome. And I wrote up my paper in Ashton Tate's framework, which corrected all my spelling, handed in my paper, immediately got an F. I got an F on my paper because I cheated using a word processor. So my point on this is at any different point in history, there have been multiple different technological things that have popped up that people fight against, okay? So when we're looking at the future, actually, let's look at the present. Whenever we try to assess and validate knowledge, right? When we try to assess and validate knowledge, most of what we consider to be knowledge is fundamentally based in Jeopardy-style memorization, where we memorize a bunch of shit. Somebody asks us a question, and then we can answer that particular question, right? Like if somebody says, what's a SYN packet? Well, that's the offset and TCP dump 1.3, right? It's just something I know off the top of my head. Doesn't mean I'm smart. It just means that I've memorized that. But we've equated that rote memorization with intelligence. And this has been perpetuated all the way back in the late 1800s with Andrew Carnegie, JP Morgan. When they were creating the education system in the United States, they prized the ability for people to memorize things, do basic mathematics, and sit in the same place for 8 hours. Does that sound familiar? Rote memorization, sitting in the same place for 8 hours. That's what they needed in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So if we come to today, the idea of having rote memorization, and that's what we're studying and that's what we're validating students on, has a couple of things going for it. One, it's really easy to assess. I can give you a multiple guess question in a test, and I can evaluate how much memorization you have actually done. It's easy. Very few people do well with it, but a lot of people do, or enough people do, that we have this system that's perpetuated itself. And now AI has completely blown that all to hell. The idea of rote memorization or rote regurgitation or writing a paper and printing a paper is something that we have been trying to program humans to do. And now we have a program that does it for us, which gets into the heart of the matter of what makes you human. What makes you valuable? It's not your ability to rotely memorize things like they started programming us to do in the late 1800s. It's not your ability to just generate a paper that's MLA or a Chicago Guide of Style appropriate, like we've been doing for the past 20, 30 years. It's your ability to encounter and solve complex problems. And the issue is that we still believe that we need to be grading people on papers, that we need to be grading people on what they can actually memorize. So how does this relate to AI? AI is a loom. AI is a slide rule. AI is a calculator. AI is a phone. AI is the next turning of the wheel where it's a tool. And their next generation, there's going to be people that know how to effectively use that as a tool. And there's going to be people that are still stuck in the old ways of being evaluated. And we're going to have another loom situation where a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. I also believe at this particular point in time that a lot of people are buying into the AI promise far more than they should in the form of executives, because they see these thought leaders and all of these different people are now like saying, okay, so I'm not going to hire any SOC 1 analyst or SOC level 1 analysts because AI is going to take that. They're missing the point. AI shouldn't be replacing people. AI should be augmenting people, because it's not a matter of computer security was a solved problem. It was a matter of people being overwhelmed, and AI can help us finally start securing systems to take the basic things off. All right, now another question. I just saw somebody, we got GERM. I've been in cyber for 2 years, 800 apps with no callbacks. I hate to say this, your resume sucks. Now, before you get offended, breathe. Everybody, if you put out lots and lots and lots of resumes, your resume sucked. I'm sorry, it did. But once again, no one taught you how to create a resume correctly. All right. So once again, you got offended. If you did, I'm sorry. Just stick with me. Please, please, please. Just give me a second. Give me a second. Okay. Don't be offended. Listen. The way that you were trained to create a resume was to create an awesome resume. And then you send it to people and they'll read an awesome resume and then they hire you. That's not how it ever worked. All right. That's not how it ever worked. No, Dark, don't send me your resume. Don't. What you need to do is create tailored resumes for the jobs that you're going after. So Jesse just put up a link to Jason Blanchard, BHIS Director of Content and Community, where he teaches you how to job hunt like a hacker. And it involves you creating a tailored resume for the job that you're going after. And if you're lucky, maybe we can convince Jason to come and hang out. I think he might be on vacation. I'm not sure. He might be back, and talk about how to job hunt like a hacker. So how it works is you look at the job requisition and you create your resume to match as much as possible the job requisition itself. Okay. And if you want, I can give you a quick overview of Jason. I don't know if Jason's back. I don't think Jason's back yet.
I think he is, but he was going through his inbox today.
All right. So
I'll get in touch with him.
So let's try to get him at some point this week where he can talk about job hunting like a hacker, and he'll show you how to tune your resume. So Megan, can you grab him at some point? Let's bring him here. Yep. So you tune your resume to match the job that you're going after, and you'll have much better success for that as well. So when I say that your resume sucks, it doesn't mean that you're stupid and you're bad at creating resumes. It's just that you're creating resumes the same way that everyone has been telling you to create a resume. And that's not the right way to do a resume to get a job. Yeah, tailored keywords, summaries, and descriptions, and you will create them for each job that you're going after. Okay? So we'll get you there. We'll get you there. All right. Whew. All right. So I hope that didn't come across as too harsh. I hope that made sense. The badass pieces of art behind me are Polish movie posters. I'm a huge fan of Polish movie posters. Go look at Polish movie posters and you'll see why. Had some other people that brought up some stuff. What do we got? By the way, it's going to snap back. By the way, I really do feel it's going to snap back with AI, but there's people that aren't hiring. There's people that aren't hiring. And they're just like going to go through, and it's at any rate, I don't need to beat this up, but yeah, all right, it's going to snap back to reality basically. Once people realize, holy crap, we got all this AI and we're still getting hacked, what the hell? Then they'll start learning on that as well. All right. What other questions do we have? Got some good resources in here. Excellent. I don't want to get off topic, but I was curious to speak about Snowden. Okay, let's talk about Snowden. What was the good thing that he did? What were the bad things he did? What would you have done it if I was whistleblower trying to get the moral dilemma? All right. So Edward Snowden is like a Rorschach test. Anything you want to believe about Edward Snowden, you can sneak. See, was he a whistleblower hero? Where he blew the lid off of data collection on United States citizens? Yes. Was he someone that put United States men and women in military, not just them, but also our um, our um, our allies at risk by indiscriminately dropping a whole bunch of files that he didn't validate on a hard drive? Yes, he's both of those things. So my take on it is was working at when I was working in intelligence, specifically like NRO, NSA, anytime that we worked on a program that did data intelligence and acquisition and distribution, a number of things were at play. One, sharing data between like the NSA and the NRO or vice versa was incredibly difficult. They oftentimes viewed each other as the enemy. So that was pretty hard. The other thing to remember is anytime we tried to do any collection on US citizens, we had to get a FISA warrant. And a FISA warrant, basically, it had to go to a judge and say, we want to collect data on this US citizen who is communicating with a known terrorist, right? And we would get that info because whenever you're making a phone call, like your cell phone, and that cell phone call is going out of the country, you have no right to privacy that you made that phone call. And the reason why is there's signaling data that you have to give up. You have to make that data public for that phone call to get routed between your phone and somebody else's phone. So if you're going through and you're making a phone call and I'm calling up a terrorist, right? And I'm calling up said terrorist directly, I won't be able to see if I'm an analyst or if you're an analyst, you won't be able to see the contents. You won't be able to see the data, but you'll see that that call was made. And that would be enough to get a FISA warrant from a judge. So you would say, this person was talking to known terrorists. We want to get full data on everything about this person. FISA warrant granted, usually relatively easily. But there usually was justification, validation, and then approval from FISA judge. Now, one of the things that a judge, or not a judge, one of the things that Edward Snowden blew the lid off of is a number of those programs that I knew very, very, very well while they were being created with this full FISA process in mind. A number of those programs, they replaced the full FISA process with a drop-down menu where you'd go through and you would drop down and say what you were doing, what was the reason why you wanted collection, what you wanted on all these different things, and then it would automate and streamline the process. And there were even things like other, where you could choose other and then automatically gain access to highly sensitive data about individuals. That's scary. So that's what Edward Snowden wanted to share with the world. All right, wanted to go through and share that information and let people know the United States was collecting a lot of information on citizens. And I believe that that is a valid gripe. That is a valid concern. If somebody can just easily eavesdrop on a US citizen with no oversight, no validation, that's bad. Okay, so yay, Edward Snowden. On the flip side, he just pulled a crap ton of data, dropped it on a hard drive, and then gave it to a journalist. And that data was not validated. He didn't go through all the documents. He didn't look at all the documents. He didn't look at all of those different things to make sure that he wouldn't put people at risk. And that's where I'm not happy with Edward Snowden. So that's my opinion on Edward Snowden. You can look at it in one of two different ways. Yes, it pisses me off that systems that I worked on to create really tight, detailed FISA requirements were basically blown wide open. And I'm also very angry at him for just pulling down data indiscriminately and giving it to a reporter in Hong Kong without actually validating said data. That's bad. All right, there you go. All right, who watches the watchers? Nemo. All right. Do you advise for finding a good mentor how to pivot to different aspects? One of the things I would recommend you do is you're here, right? You are here in this Discord server, and you have a lot of different Discord channels. We have like something like 47,000 people in our Discord servers. It's a little bit crazy how many people we have. So this is a good place for you all to hang out and be part of a community, this and the Black Hills Information Security Discord servers. So I think at the Black Hills InfoSec Discord server, friends of BHIS, contributors, got a lot of people. Hackett program. I feel like there's almost too much going on in our Discord server, to be honest with you. So I don't know how many solid different people. Meme team, backdoors and breaches, speaking mentor. Oh my gosh, we got so many people in here. But last I checked across all of our Discord servers, we have something like 47,000 people. So there are a lot of people in this community. So it's not an issue of just being looking for a mentor. You want a community, right? And one of the big things that we're working on here with anti-siphon and everything that we're doing is we're trying to create that sense of community for everybody. So right now online, BHIS, we have 5,492 people live at this moment. Okay. So that is a community. You should really be part of that community and hang out with us. Because like I said, we're trying to keep our pool clean. There we go. 52,000 members. And now I guess went up. It's 6,755 people online. So you have a community, right? Use that community. And we really try to tune this to make it a safe space, that it isn't just, trying to keep religion and politics out of it, but really trying to make sure that we're also creating a space where people aren't a-holes to each other as well. So if we can get the link for the BHIS community server, that would be awesome as well. Any tips on hiring qualified candidates? Every college university seems to have a cyber program. Most programs are very low value, taking advantage of money, and they're focused on red team. Everyone wants to be a cool, sexy, cool hacker. So one of the things I would recommend is, that's one of the reasons why we like the ACE-T cert. I don't think Zach got enough time to talk about it today, but the ACE-T cert, I think we have instructions on getting the ACE-T cert over. Did we get that added, Megan? There it is. If you go into resources, there's a document, anti-siphon training, ACE-T core certification. And I would recommend having them get ACE-T certified. Now, here's the reason why I recommend the ACE-T cert. First thing is, yes, it has a multiple choice question. By the way, we created multiple choice questions for the certification because everyone was asking for them and we hate them. I know that seems weird, just bear with me. I hate how many certifications out there are just multiple choice. And there's a ton of them. And I hate them. I want them all to die. So we created one. And the reason why we created one is to differentiate it out. So you got the multiple choice that has that type of filter. Then after you do that, you have to solve like 3 of 5 cyber range challenges. And then you have to do a write-up of how you solved that challenge, okay? How did you solve that challenge? Your certification is passing the certification, the multiple choice test, solving the cyber range challenges with applied knowledge, and then writing, and then that is your certification. Now, I don't go through and check and read them. I don't validate them. I don't say they're good. I don't say they're bad, but they're available to you as an employer. If someone has that certification, you can read what they wrote. And if they just put garbage in, don't hire that person. If we do some checks for plagiarism, that's about it. But we don't validate and say that they're good. We don't say that they're bad. You can validate that because it's an intensely subjective process. So if they have done well on the multiple choice test, they have solved the cyber range challenges, and they've submitted the paper, that gives you a more holistic view of an analyst on that as well. And also, I think the lowest cost is $5. So if somebody's like, oh, it's a certification, it's $5. Once again, we're not making any money off of this stuff. It's just, it just pisses me off whenever someone's like, we're going to charge $1,000 for the certification. Screw you. $1,000 for a certification.
And we don't make them renew with CPE credits and all that.
No, that's insane, right? Screw that. So I get mad at this stuff because it's literally just a cash cow. There's a bunch of investors and people trying to make as much money off the blood, sweat, and tears of people. So screw those guys. And that's part of the reason why we set it up. We want to destroy them as much as we possibly can. So that's great. The quality of one's life is how many event t-shirts you collect and how many enemies, and making the right enemies out there is really important. So there you go. Well, it's not just CompTIA, right? You got CEH. I do think some of them are pretty affordable. But whenever you get into some certifications that are $899, there's one certification that will not go named, but they now require you to install software on your computer when you take the certification exam. And they, if you're running any software, they kick things out, and it's just stupid. It's just really, really, really horrible how difficult they make things. And screw it. All right, next question. Yeah, a malware cert, that would be cool. There you go. That's what I need to do. We need to create, Megan, we need to create a malware cert
A
where you
malware
create a piece
cert?
of functional, you create a piece of functional malware, you bypass all of the antivirus engines, and then you submit it to Black Hills Information Security for grading.
To Joff directly.
Yeah, we'll send it directly to Joff.
Yeah.
And then we'll be like, yes, this looks good.
They'll be
Verily, it
like, why
works.
am I getting all this malware all
Why
this
am I getting all this malware? Or how does John get lots of research and development for free? Right. So
Exactly. I love it.
no, Joff would love it. He would be cool on that. Oh yeah, then you have to pay for your second certification exam. I've been hearing stories about people taking hours validating their computer with a proctor, going through and seeing if their computer meets the. It's so stupid. Screw it. And it's not a problem. Like if you're just using it, like here's a write up, and then you can test it and see how much it's just bad. It's just bad. I don't know what the hell we're gonna do on
We're
that.
gonna we're gonna break the certification industry next. That's our
That's our
next
goal,
break.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's our goal. So. PhD topics and suggestions for your thoughts. I'm too burnt today, Win. Hit me up tomorrow. I'll think about that on PhD level stuff. So, all right. How am I supposed to put my laptop? That's another thing. They're so worried about people having cheating computers. Like like what is it? OSCP, you have to have your camera on at the same time. Like right now, I could keep my camera on, you could record my screen, and I could totally have another computer off to the left that you would never see, right? I just it's just stupid.
I know. It's like cheaters are gonna cheat regardless. It's like just
And also it's pen testing. I
yeah.
mean,
It's kind of the
cheating is
point.
like cheating is like what we do, right? Like
Right.
it's like we've got this cheaters test to test how good of a cheater you are in IT, but we need to make sure that you don't cheat on the cheating test. It's like it's insane. All right, everybody. Literally had me take off my glasses and look for cameras, right?
So weird.
So weird. So weird. They required him to show the door, Jesse said. That's crazy. All right, everybody. Well, let's wrap it up. We're going to get on the news here in just a little bit. We'll be back well, I'm going to go on the news in 30 minutes. So if you want to hear more me, jump on the news. I'll see you guys there. So with that, get rolling. I'll see you bright and early. Now, remember, today we actually started at 9 in the morning Mountain. We're going to be starting the actual instruction an hour later. Today we start early because of getting computers, getting the virtual machines, getting people set up in Discord, doing all of that stuff. So lecture will start at 10 Mountain, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific time. I just skipped over Central. All right. So with that, everybody, get out of here. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Have a good night. Thanks for joining us for day one of Active Defense and Cyber Deception. Daryl, go ahead and kill it with fire. See y'all tomorrow.